Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Let me explain something to you about face masks, because everyone is driving me crazy. Especially here in Costa Rica, people watching the news, they're going crazy, they're masking themselves to death, they're sucking away all the oxygen. This is insane. And the thing is, people need to know the real truth about face masks. Now, if you live in China, Japan, Hong Kong, or some of those places, you may need face masks because they have a serious pollution problem and they have a serious coronavirus problem where the coronavirus could be anywhere, in the air, the floor, the garbage can. They got dead animals everywhere. Yeah, you might need it in China or possibly in Japan or one of those Asian countries, but you don't need it here in Costa Rica. You don't need it in the United States. It is nonsense. It is absurd. But let me tell you something. If you're even having a face mask and you got corners where the mask don't grip around your nose and so on and so forth, you don't have the right face mask and you're going to catch the coronavirus. And worse yet, if you're eating pig meat, clams, lobsters, oysters, shellfish, you're going to get coronavirus anyway. So why even use a face mask? So, let's be intelligent. You need a face mask if you go to clubs and maybe with this large crowd of people and you don't know them. Yes, you may need a face mask. But please don't drive us crazy with the face mask. Take off the face mask. Use the face mask when you're in large crowds of people, in trains and buses and so on and so forth. Be intelligent. Be wise, and don't be foolish. So, thank you for listening.
If you are a medical doctor, hospital nurse, healthcare practitioner, or disease specialist, we recommend you invest in a heavy-duty face mask where you can breathe with comfort and complete your specific job order, and not suffer a deadly disease virus infection. Search your medical stores. Please note the importance that you do not use the 3M surgical mask and put your respiratory system in jeopardy and suffer health complications from lack of air.
Collaboration with the What If channel, where we usually dive into the hypothetical scenarios about the human body, humanity, our planet, and the cosmos. Check out our channel by visiting the link in the description below.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this portion, I'm going to show you through many factors how you can protect yourself from the coronavirus and many diseases by hand touching, going through the subways, going through the buses, entering your car, leaving your car, going through the supermarkets, going through the everyday type of business that you do. There's so many ways you can contaminate yourself and cross-contaminate yourself. And here are just a few points. Number one, wear some type of plastic or latex gloves, something really soft. Don't touch everything with the gloves. Try not to touch your phones and things of this sort. just use it as if you're walking through the subway. Use the gloves to touch the rails and so on and so forth. Touch the door of the train. Once you get in the train, you roll it off, you dispose of it. If you don't have a garbage can, throw it in put it somewhere in some plastic bag and put it in your pocketbook somewhere. But don't cross-contaminate. Okay, because these rails and things and these posts that they have in the trains and the buses, they're very nasty, very contaminated. People sneeze in their hands, they sneeze on the rails, they pick their nose. It just goes on and on and on. So many things. Okay, so you want to touch those things with gloves. Now, if you don't want to use the gloves, maybe use some type of Kleenex napkin. You can sort of kind of like touch the rails with the gloves, and then when you get into a train, you dispose of it or put it in a bag somewhere and then throw it away later. But don't touch those rails. Don't touch anything. Everything you touch it with a napkin or with the gloves, whichever is comfortable or convenient for you. So buy yourself a little box of Kleenex or a little pouch of Kleenex in a little small plastic and use that to sort of do your everyday business. When you go to pull out your phones, you want to take those gloves off because you're going to cross-contaminate your phones. If you have these napkins that you've touched these rails, don't touch your phones with it. Dispose of it and touch it with your bare hands. You want to be very intelligent because you want to keep yourself from disease. There's a lot of sick people. If you live in one of those major cities like New York City, California, they're loaded with foreigners from all over the world. People coming from every type of the world with every type of disease. Ebola, coronavirus, SARS, chickenpox, HIV. It just goes on and on and on and on. You don't want to take any chances. The population is a very sick world. People have very different standards of living. And this is not about being discriminating against Chinese people, because anyone can get this virus. So just keep that in mind. So learn how to be very hygienic and very clean, because you got to be very intelligent. You go into a supermarket to buy food, you touch the food with gloves. You touch the rail carts with gloves. When you get home, you put the groceries on some type of paper section, and you start to clean your groceries with some type of alcohol, with some type of soft napkins, and you dispose of them immediately. But don't cross-contaminate. Okay? You have to be very careful. Almost everything in this world that you get today, you have to cross-contaminate. It is a very, very dangerous world. So, thank you very much and have yourself a nice day. Ladies and gentlemen, this portion of this episode 3 is very sentimental to me, because when someone breaks the word of God, it means a lot to me, especially when someone chooses to eat the cockroach of the earth, the pig or the hog. I take this personal. In the Holy Bible of Isaiah 66 verses 16 and 17. The Lord says it in unambiguous words. For behold, the Lord will come with fire, and with his chariots, like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. They that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the garden behind, on one tree in the midst, eating swine flesh, and the abomination and the mouse shall be consumed together, saith the Lord. It is right there. He told you, you will be consumed with the mouse for eating swine flesh. Ladies and gentlemen, how much clearer can that be to you? Pig meat, a cockroach of the earth, a nasty, filthy animal. Sometimes I can't even understand why God made this animal, but I can't question God, because everything is for a purpose. But this is not food. This is nasty. This is filthy. This is an animal that just eats everything. He's a scavenger. And yet, man in our society put cockroaches in the plates of the people every day in restaurants. McDonald's, Burger King, just go on and on. You'll see swine flesh. No one cares what the Bible say. No one cares what Almighty God says. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't want to be sick with coronavirus, you don't want to be sick with SARS, trichinosis, and all these exotic diseases, and you don't want wingworms and pinworms and tapeworms and all these nasty diseases, don't eat swine flesh. It is nasty. It is a nasty animal. Don't eat it. It is almost like eating a mouse. A swine is a nasty animal. It is not food. It was made to clean the earth, not clean your stomach. Ladies and gentlemen, please hear me out. You know, you can be lost and not be in the kingdom of heaven just for eating a piece of meat. You don't gotta rob a bank. You don't have to rob somebody's house. You don't have to kill someone. All you got to do is eat swine flesh. And the book of Isaiah is right there. And if you go on and further down into the Bible in the New Testament, there is many passages that tell you swine is abomination to God. Protect your health. Eat to live. Don't eat to die. Because this world offers nothing for you but death and suffering. Ladies and gentlemen, please watch the next videos that follows this segment and watch all the poisonous flesh of the swine and all the diseases and all the makeup of this nasty animal, and let these videos show you what it does to your intestinal organs, to your heart, your body, your nervous system, worms in your eyes, worms in your chest, worms on your face. Just watch the next few videos and know that if you're eating swine flesh, you are going to get more than just a coronavirus. You're going to get some terrible, horrified disease that will become unbearable. God bless you. Please get rid of the swine flesh. Be healthy and eat to live. And eat for Jesus. Eat, drink, do all to the glory of God. Honor your Savior. Thank you very much.
Symptoms such as fatigue, headaches and seizures. After the diagnosis, the doctors were luckily able to remove the parasites from the man's body and he has recovered fully. Besides sparginosis, there's another infection called DIAGNOSE caused by tapeworms living in beef and pork. You could get infected by either of these infections by eating raw or undercooked beef and pork, which is probably how the patient that came to the Cambridge hospital infected himself. In order to avoid further health complications caused by the parasites,
If you're grossed out by worms, turn this video off right now. You do not want to see this. It's a video of basically worms being removed from a bodybuilder's colon. And of course, he's okay. He wound up making it through the surgery, but let's just have a quick look.
So here we have basically a bodybuilder that was complaining about some bloating and some discomfort in their stomach, and that is not spaghetti. That is definitely not pasta. You do not want to eat that. These are tapeworms, pinworms, roundworms. Those are some of the most common worms in the United States. These worms are basically caused by a high protein diet. And that's why you see them more commonly found in cats and dogs. It's a medical fact that they need meat to live. Biologists say that it's like maggots, they're eating the waste and the garbage, and that's kind of how they live to survive. Commonly found in pork and fish, raw, uncooked meat, eggs and dairy and things like that.
Whew, so
Hello and welcome to the channel. You may have wondered why Muslims and Jews don't eat pork. In this video I'm gonna show you the 10 reasons why they don't eat pork, ham or bacon. Number 10. A pig is a real garbage cat. It will eat anything including urine, excrement, dirt, decaying animal flesh, maggots or decaying vegetables. They will even eat the cancerous growths of other pigs or animals. Number 9. The meat and fat of a pig absorbs toxins like a sponge. Their meat can be 30 times more toxic than beef or venison. Number 8. When eating beef or venison, it takes 8 to 9 hours to digest the meat, so what little toxins are in the meat are slowly put into our system and can be filtered by the liver. But when pork is eaten, it takes only 4 hours to digest the meat. We thus get a much higher level of toxins within a shorter time. Number 7. Unlike other mammals, a pig doesn't sweat or perspire. Perspiration is a means by which toxins are removed from the body. Since a pig doesn't sweat, the toxins remain within its body and in the meat. Number 6. Good to know that pigs and swine are so poisonous that you can hardly kill them with strychnine or other poisons. That's the reason why all pig farms in the Western countries are so dirty. In the UK, even they feed the pigs with the maggots. Number 5. Swine and pigs have over a dozen parasites within them, such as tapeworms, flukes, worms, and trichinae. There is no safe temperature at which pork can be cooked to ensure that all these parasites, their cysts and eggs will be killed. Number 4. Pig meat has twice as much fat as beef. It means that pork can cause high blood cholesterol levels in our body. Number 3. Cows have a complex digestive system, having 4 stomachs. It thus takes over 24 hours to digest their vegetarian diet, causing its food to be purified of toxins. In contrast, the swine's one stomach takes only about 4 hours to digest its foul diet, turning its toxic food into flesh. Number 2. The swine carries about 30 diseases which can be easily passed to humans. Swine flu and MRSA are 2 bacteria which are found mainly among pigs. Number 1. The trichinae worm of the swine is microscopically small, and once ingested can lodge itself in our intestines, muscles, spinal cord, or the brain. This results in the disease trichinosis. It can be even worse if we eat undercooked or raw pig meat. Eating red meat, especially pork, can even cause cancer. Thank you for watching this video. Bye.
See what happens inside your body when you eat pork, and learn why you should avoid it. After this video, please leave us a comment. The consumption of pork is forbidden in some religions. Pigs are the animals that consume the most disgusting things you can imagine, such as spoiled foods, feces and urine. The worst thing is that the toxins they consume cannot be eliminated from their bodies, so they actually accumulate in their organs and fat. Yersinia enterocolítica represents a dangerous contaminant which can be present in the pig's body. It causes diarrhea, vomiting, cramps, fever and sickness. Ractopamine is another microorganism found in animals' body which can even cause death. Loss of appetite and contamination issue can be caused by Neosolium, found in the pig's intestines. Fever, myalgia, malaise and edema can be also caused by the parasitic roundworm Trichinella. Chills, sweating and migraine are usually caused by the meningococcal infection. Nausea and fatigue is often caused by the hepatitis C viral irritation. The intestinal parasites in pigs need to be destroyed in order to avoid all of these health issues. Pork, do not forget to wash your hands, and when you buy pork meat, make sure it has no medications, antitoxins, ractopamine and chemicals in it. However, the doubt about this meat still exists even when the pork is properly cooked, because these animals consume many substandard foods. You can increase the risk of many diseases by consuming pork. In the production of pork meat, pigs from factory are those generally used. But many factory farms do not offer clean air for pigs, sufficient sunlight and clean pastures. They give pigs medications and anti-infection agents as food instead of green grass, which make them grow and age faster. As we've already mentioned above, most of the pigs in the farms are surrounded by their vomit, feces and urine. They actually develop pneumonia before being slaughtered because their feces and urine contain ammonia. Pigs also various skin issues because of the unhealthy environment. The consumption of pork can cause many side effects. All of these are just a few conditions.
This program is made possible by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, working to build a more healthy, just, and inclusive future for everyone at czi.co, and by contributions to this PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
A fast-moving, invisible enemy sweeping across the globe, emptying streets and schools, grinding travel to a halt, shuttering businesses and crashing markets.
I am officially declaring a national emergency.
Turning lives upside down. We collected your questions, and on confronting coronavirus, we'll search for answers.
To protect the American people, we'll consider anything and everything.
And we'll look to the future and what it may hold.
The rule of the game is never give up.
Welcome to our PBS NewsHour special, Confronting Coronavirus. I'm Judy Woodruff. A virus none of us can see with the naked eye has turned our lives upside down in ways we couldn't imagine just a few weeks ago. Most of us are anxious because so much has changed so fast, frightened because so much is unknown. Knowing that, we decided to try to address some of your concerns. Over the past week, we've collected your questions, and tonight, we've invited a team of experts to answer many of them. They cover your own personal health, the economy, and how prepared we are as a country for this threat. Later, we'll also hear from Dr. Anthony Fauci of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, probably the most respected voice in the nation right now. But to begin, a look at how we got here.
It's all over the world. It's incredible what's happened in such a short period of time.
Only a few months ago, the disease now known as COVID-19 is believed to have originated at one seafood and poultry market in the city of Wuhan, China. In late December, health officials in that city began reporting dozens of cases of pneumonia with no known cause. The Chinese government was slow to disclose the extent of the outbreak, but officials soon identified a new flu-like respiratory virus belonging to the family of coronaviruses, named for the crown-like spikes on their surface.
We've been expecting a novel coronavirus to emerge for the last 15 years.
Peter Daszak is a zoologist who has spent years studying how diseases spread from wildlife to humans and looking specifically at coronaviruses.
The closest relative to the virus that causes COVID-19 is one that we found in bats in 2013, and there are hundreds of other coronaviruses that are very closely related to this one.
There are 7 known types of coronavirus that can affect humans. 4 cause mild symptoms each year, like the common cold. Another is severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, which also originated in China in 2002 and has since infected 8,000 people around the world, killing about 10% of them. Yet another is Middle East respiratory syndrome, or MERS, which broke out in 2012 and 2013 in Saudi Arabia, infected nearly 2,500 and killed more than 850. That's a 35% death rate.
And this one, COVID-19, has a much lower mortality rate, but still at least 10 times higher than the seasonal flu. So it's lethal. It also spreads very easily.
The virus appears to pass through droplets in the air and on surfaces. Children seem to be less susceptible to COVID-19, and the majority of people recover without hospitalization. But it's especially dangerous for older adults and those with underlying health problems. There's currently no available vaccine for COVID-19.
The answer to containing is public health measures. We can't rely on a vaccine over the next several months to a year.
After COVID-19 spread in Wuhan in January, Chinese officials began drastic measures to contain it, building temporary hospitals to isolate cases, forcing people into quarantine, and even separating family members. But by mid-January, the World Health Organization reported that COVID-19 had escaped China, first to Thailand, Japan, and South Korea, and then beyond. The United States confirmed its first case in Washington state, and with cases growing around the globe, by the end of the month, the WHO declared a global health emergency.
The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China, but because of what is happening in other countries.
Yet, early on, President Trump consistently downplayed the threat from the virus.
We have it totally under control. Looks like by April, you know, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. I hope that's true. The risk to the American people remains very low.
But it soon became clear the U.S. wasn't doing enough testing to understand how quickly it was spreading here.
We cannot stop this pandemic if we don't know who is infected.
As more cases were confirmed, schools and businesses closed, markets plunged, and late last week, President Trump announced a national emergency and changed his tone.
It's not a good situation, and I'm not even talking about the economy, I'm talking about the lives of a lot of people.
But as testing ramps up and huge parts of the country are shutting down, there's concern about whether it's too late to prevent a crush at the nation's hospitals, something already seen in Italy and Iran. Meanwhile, in China, it appears that the drastic measures taken by the government are working. Officials there say new infections have slowed dramatically, and 2 months after they took action, restrictions are being lifted, even as the full scope of this pandemic remains unclear.
And thanks to all of you for your questions you sent as well. We'll have more later in the show. For now, if you'd like some tips on what you can be doing right now to protect yourself from COVID-19, here are some tips for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The pandemic is not just a health crisis, it's also triggered an economic crisis, and it's already having a major impact on our jobs, our finances, and our futures.
As the fears and uncertainty around COVID-19 spread, financial markets have been left reeling.
Wall Street crashed again. For stocks, it was their worst day of trading since the 1987 market crash.
Just 1 month ago, Wall Street was trading at record highs. Today, volatility is the new normal. Trillions of dollars of market value have been wiped out, and fears of an approaching recession are growing.
The speed and size of the contraction is faster than the Great Depression.
U.S. stocks are now down roughly 30% from their recent peak in February. The crisis has all but erased the gains since the beginning of the Trump administration. Some of the hardest hit industries: airlines and tourism. Major carriers like American Airlines, Delta, and United have been dealt a staggering blow and are asking for an immediate $50 billion injection of financial aid to avoid bankruptcy in the coming months. In the U.S., several states have ordered bars and restaurants to close, leaving millions of workers uncertain about the future.
I'm really concerned about how I'm going to pay my bills.
That concern is spreading as layoffs and furloughs begin across a number of sectors. Ford, GM, and Fiat Chrysler have all temporarily closed U.S. plants. And as the government asks Americans to avoid any gathering of 10 people or more, life in America as we know it is changing like never before. All that means amusement parks like Disney World shut down. Major music festivals and tours canceled. Professional and college sports on hold. A number of large firms have banned all non-essential travel.
We have not ever seen a shock like this since 9/11.
The U.S. government is working to pass billions in aid, assistance, and loans. The Federal Reserve, in coordination with central banks around the world, slashed interest rates to zero in a desperate effort to shore up the financial system. But the deep and structural shocks to the global economy are just beginning to be felt, from what experts call the worst public health crisis in a century.
Let's talk now about those shocks and what they mean today and down the line. Joining us from Chicago, Austin Goolsbee. He was the chair of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, and he's now an economics professor at the University of Chicago. Here with me in the studio is Michelle Singletary, a personal finance columnist for the Washington Post. Thanks to both of you for being here. I want to jump right into the questions because people are worried. Austin, I want you to meet Linda Elkin. She's a 70-year-old retiree from St. Louis, Missouri. Here's her first question.
I'm retired and my pension is sinking like the Titanic right now. Is there anything the government can do to help retirees?
Austin, what about that? Is there help coming for people like Linda?
Well, yes and no. Look, as we go through a period like this and the stock market is down and then up a little and then down some more, the government is now talking about short-run relief that they're going to send checks out to potentially every American or a lot of Americans or all Americans below a certain income level. It will help a retiree like her more than a payroll tax cut would have, obviously, because she's not paying payroll tax. But I think in a moment like this where the virus has taken over and the economy's in lockdown, virus economics aren't the same as regular economics, as I say. So I think the most important things are trying to protect your health. The government's got to try to slow the spread of this virus, and we got to just make sure that we don't morph what is a short-term intense pain hit on the economy, that we don't morph it into some long-run depression-like entity.
Michelle, to that point, we got questions from different parts of the population, too, who are processing this differently. I want to play you now a question from a woman named Rachel Kabagadu. She's 26 years old, and she lives in Texas. She wants to know about her future and what it could look like. Take a listen to what she said.
Is it wise to change my investing? Should I be concerned about where I'm putting my money in? Should I be taking money out of the stock market? Like, what should I do concerning my personal finances?
In all this volatility, Austin talked about how does someone like Rachel process that?
Well, the good thing is she's got youth on her time, and so she's got decades before retirement. So I would encourage her to continue to invest for retirement, because right now, unfortunately, for those of us who are closer to retirement, stocks are on sale, equities are on sale, and so she'll get more for her money. And just make sure that as she's investing, that she's diversified. But I would say continue to go ahead, because this right now in this moment, it seems like it's never going to end, but it will end. Even if it takes them a year, we're going to find a vaccine, hopefully, and then things will start to slowly recover. And all that money that she put in, even though it's kind of scary now, will start to increase, because that's how markets have done historically. Even the Great Depression ended.
And thanks to all of you for all the questions you sent in as well. Remember, confronting coronavirus means not just examining where America is now, but how countries around the world are facing this global pandemic. And that is where Judy picks up things next. Judy?
What began in China has now spread around the globe. If you've lost count, COVID-19 now infects more than 170 countries and territories, with more confirmed cases and deaths every day. Outside of China, among the first hit was South Korea, which has managed to slow the virus's spread through national effort. The same cannot be said for Italy, which now has the most cases outside of China. For a look at how each of these countries is responding to this crisis, we turn to special correspondents in those countries, Patrick Falk in Beijing, Bruce Harrison in Seoul, and Hermione Kitson in Italy. And we welcome all of you to our special. Let me start with you, Patrick Falk. Tell us how China has dealt with this from the beginning, and is there a sense now that they're beginning to get it under control?
Well, I think, Judy, the best way of describing the situation right now is just that it's incredibly uncertain. The headline piece of news today, of course, was that there were no new domestic cases of infection. That's a massive step for China to take. But on the flip side, there were 34 imported cases of the disease. That may not sound like an awful lot in the grand scheme of things when you think of the tens of thousands of people across China that have been infected over the past several months. But remember, remember just the day before, there were only 12 new cases of infection. So imported cases really is the situation that authorities are grappling with a lot right now. And the focus is shifting away from Wuhan, the epicenter of the virus, to major cities like here in Beijing and Shanghai. These are the ports of entries where most of those imported cases of infections are arriving. And President Xi Jinping, chairing a special COVID-19 meeting on Wednesday, in fact, said that there was a real risk of the outbreak rebounding at this point.
Patrick, is the government acknowledging what was done right and what was done wrong? And do you believe them when they say this is tapering off?
Well, the central government really hasn't accepted an awful lot of blame for this. And from the very beginning, it's actually framed this as being the fault of provincial leaders of Hubei province. And it's really portrayed the central government as having come in and cleaned up the mess, essentially. And in recent days, it's really portrayed this as being a victory of sorts, saying that they have essentially reversed the spread of the virus and almost won the battle against the disease. But that is why this is such a critical time for Beijing, because if there is a second wave of this outbreak, there'll be nobody to blame at this point. And there is a lot of frustration among the people of China. They are fed up with the situation. They are fed up with lockdowns. They want this situation to be over.
Patrick Falk in Beijing, thank you so much. And now to South Korea, to Seoul, and to Bruce Harrison. So, Bruce, South Korea seems to be one of the rare success stories in all of this. Tell us how they've done it. How have they managed to bend the curve, and is it actually working?
Judy, a strong sign the public believes the government's efforts working is evident on these streets tonight. In this neighborhood, you can see a lot of people actually out having dinner and drinks, and that wasn't the case here just a few weeks ago when the situation seemed far from control. But the government's done a good job building the public's confidence, and one of the main ways it's done that is through tracing, tracking, and isolating. So it's finding people it believes may have the coronavirus, testing them, and then quickly getting them into isolation, whether a home quarantine or at a hospital, to make sure they don't get more sick and spread the virus further. And important that part of that aspect is that they interview these people, they find out where they've been and who they've been in contact with, so it leads to more testing down the road. Another key part of the effort here has been communication. I get several text messages a day from the government telling me where new cases have been confirmed in Seoul. That allows me to know where not to go, or if I'm going somewhere, to be a bit more cautious. And all these efforts are building trust in the government. The public here has been quite good at the guidelines the government has laid out, whether it's social distancing or following guidelines on washing hands, wearing masks on public transportation. All these things seem to be working to further prevent the spread of COVID-19.
And Bruce, how concerned are people, though, about whether there's going to be a second wave, whether this is going to linger and come back?
Judy, we've seen a small increase in cases, and this comes after several consecutive days where the total number of cases had fallen below 100. And that was significant because at one point, cases were over 900 in a single day. So there's been some optimism that maybe the virus outbreak had peaked here and the numbers would only fall going forward. It's too soon to say that, but I think there's optimism the government will be able to bring these under control as well. We've seen that South Korea has the robust capability to test up to 15,000 people a day. There seems to be no shortage of tests right now. Companies had been stockpiling before even the first outbreak in this country. So I believe the public is hoping the government can target these new cluster infections and prevent large outbreaks like we saw in February before things get out of hand again.
Bruce Harrison reporting for us from Seoul. Thank you so much. And now to Italy, to Hermione Kitson. Hermione, Italy has turned out to be one of the disaster stories, disaster focus points of all this. Is the government saying, is there an understanding now of what went wrong there?
Health authorities believe that perhaps the virus was in circulation for quite some time before it was actually detected. It then spread very, very quickly in the densely populated area of the north in the region of Lombardia. And while that region of Lombardia was quickly declared a red zone, it was quickly locked down, the rest of the country wasn't. So people started to travel from the north into the centre and then down into the south of the country, potentially spreading the virus. So perhaps that national lockdown could have come into effect sooner. Another element that comes into play when talking about Italy's high mortality rate is Italy's ageing population. We have Europe's oldest population, and the average age of coronavirus victims here is 80 years old. So a lot of people in that very high risk category.
And so, Hermione, now that this lockdown has fully taken effect, how are the medical services, the healthcare services, and the rest of the country doing? Do they feel that the situation has crested?
The healthcare system here really is struggling. It's overwhelmed. It's a breaking point. There are makeshift hospital wards that are spilling out into car parks, into warehouses. Those on the front line, those medical staff on the front line say they really never have seen anything like it before in Italy. They describe the situation like a war zone, and they say they're really struggling to keep up with demand. The government here has had to put into service 10,000 student doctors 9 months before they're actually due to graduate, just in a bid to boost capacity. So this is the second week of lockdown. We're hoping that we will see the effects in terms of the number of cases in the next few days. It's hoped the spike we've seen in the last 24 hours could be the peak that we were waiting for, and that we will see the slowdown in the rate of infections in the next few days. But if we don't see a slowdown, this lockdown will have to continue.
We are all watching and certainly hoping for the very best in each one of these countries. Hermione, thank you. And so thank you again to Patrick Falk, to Bruce Harrison, and to Hermione Kitson. Their experience is what many people are looking to figure out which direction the United States is headed. Will we end up like Italy or more like South Korea? Let's go back to Amna.
From coast to coast, scenes of a U.S. healthcare system bracing for the worst. Temporary tents standing sentry outside some hospitals, winding lines of cars for a limited supply of tests. As frustration builds, America's medical professionals are sounding the alarm about a looming crisis. Likely shortages of everything from beds and ventilators to face masks and gloves.
If this burns through very, very quickly, we could be in trouble. I mean, there's just no two ways about it.
The White House call for social distancing is a crucial part of the national response.
Enjoy your home. Stay. I would just say right now, we have to get this problem fixed.
It's an attempt to flatten the curve or slow the spread of the virus enough so that hospitals aren't overwhelmed with a surge of patients all at once. Still, the U.S. healthcare system is readying for an influx of cases it will struggle to care for. There are nearly 47,000 intensive care beds at community hospitals across the United States. But even a moderate outbreak, experts say, would require quadruple that, some 200,000 ICU beds. So for now, a scramble to expand medical capacity across the country. In New York State, for example, the health department is even speeding up certifications of nursing students and calling on retired doctors and nurses to help. Health officials leading the U.S. response are urging hospitals nationwide to postpone elective surgeries.
Let's all be responsible and cancel things that we can cancel to really free up hospital beds and space.
In Washington state, the country's first virus hotspot, a clinical trial for a COVID-19 vaccine kicked off this week. Any vaccine rollout, however, wouldn't be ready for at least a year. Among the biggest concerns to date, a failure to test enough people quickly enough, and ensuring frontline healthcare workers have what they need to care for incoming patients and protect themselves.
There were nurses exposed to a possible COVID-19 patient. I don't know if I need to be off until we get the patient's test result back. I'm left wondering what to do.
How will our system cope as America's doctors and nurses are hit by the very virus they're trying to fight?
And those are the big questions right now. What will happen in the U.S. next? And how prepared is our health system? Hotspots include Washington State, California, and New York. But here is a look now at how the virus is spreading across the entire country.
Now, let's talk to one of the top officials overseeing our national response. He's Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and he joins me from the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for joining us. Now that the United States has begun this massive mobilization, the country's virtually shut down, is it fair to say that Americans are starting to get their arms around this crisis?
Yes, I think as a whole, as a country, a couple of things, Judy, they're starting to really see the seriousness of it, not only from within, when you see the new cases every single day, but looking at what's happened in other countries, in China, in South Korea, in Japan to some extent, and now in Europe, where most of the new cases that are arising globally are coming from Europe. That together with the very forceful approach that's been taking to containment and mitigation right now, I think the people of the United States, at least from what I can see, there are some exceptions, Judy, some I think disturbing exceptions, where you see pictures which are not, totally representative of the country, but people in bars and in dances and in parties. If you look at the guidelines that were put out just a couple of days ago, they were decided upon because of some serious reflection about what the best thing to do for the American public. And those guidelines should really be read carefully by everyone. The idea about making sure that people who are elderly, and particularly those with underlying conditions, should self-isolate, stay away from crowds, stay away from bars, all the kinds of things. They're very well spelled out there. I think for the most part, the country is seeing that. Of course, it can be inconvenient. But this is a very unique opportunity that we have to prevent something that could get very bad, to blunt it so that it is within reason that we can contain. I think we can do it. Judy, I know we can do it, but we just need to implement the things that have been suggested.
So just quickly, you mentioned China, no new cases there today. They reported for the first time in a long time. Does that give you a sense and others a sense of how long the U.S. is going to be dealing with this?
Well, again, we get asked that all the time. One cannot give a definitive date about in X number of weeks, we're going to be okay, we can go back to normal. That's the reason why when the guidelines came out, they came out as a 15-day interim guideline to reevaluate at the end of that period to see where we're going. Because obviously this is something that is formidable. I mean, when you look at the numbers that are going up, we've got to see if we can get ahead of the curve. I always say, and I believe it's true, that when you react to something and it has to do with an infectious disease outbreak, when you think you're overreacting, you are probably acting appropriately or maybe even underreacting. So I know people are a little concerned about, well, how long is this going to last? How inconvenient it is going to be. Just hold tight and let's see how things go over the next couple of weeks.
Several things I want to ask you. First of all, what President Trump had to say today about new drugs, testing for new drugs, anti-malaria drugs, for example. How confident are scientists that there's a real potential with some of these? Well,
Judy, that's a good question, and it really is a question of a balance. None of the drugs that are out there right now have been definitively proven to be safe and effective. But, and it's an important but, there are some with some suggestions, sometimes anecdotal, which, not a really great controls, some in animal models. When you have an outbreak where there are no specific therapies, we were faced with this very clearly during the early years of HIV, before we had no available, effective, and safe drugs. What you do is you strike a balance between making something available to the public, at the same time you do it under the auspices of a protocol. And it could be a relatively loose protocol, like an expanded access protocol, and even do some compassionate usage, where you have a balance between getting things to people who need it, but at the same time not just throwing drugs out there that you don't know anything about. You really have to have some sort of a protocol to look for safety and to ultimately see if you can get some efficacy signal. That's what the president was talking about. That's what Steve Hahn, the commissioner of the FDA, was talking about today. Right?
Dr. Anthony Fauci, we thank you very much.
Good to be with you, Judy.
Unlike practically every other challenge we face as Americans, as humans, No one is immune from this virus. It has the potential to harm us all unless we take steps to limit its spread, to protect ourselves, our loved ones, and people we don't know. We can address its potential to do harm by, in turn, our own efforts to do good. Our humanity, the thing that makes us vulnerable to this virus, is also the thing that can keep it at bay. Which is why we choose to end on a hopeful note tonight, knowing that Americans coming together have the capacity to prevail against this deadly enemy. And that concludes our special Confronting Coronavirus. Be sure to join us tomorrow night on the PBS NewsHour, and you can always find more on our website, pbs.org/newshour, and on our social pages. We wish you all good health and comfort. Good night.
Tonight, as the world's health experts warn, a second wave of the coronavirus is very likely in the fall and winter. President Trump is downplaying those risks.
Now, if we have pockets, a little pocket here, then we're going to have it put out. It goes out, and it's going to go out fast. We're going to be watching for it. But it's all possible. It's also possible it doesn't come back at all.
But the nation's top health experts say that's unlikely.
We will have coronavirus in the fall. I am convinced of that.
A CBS News poll finds if stay-at-home orders were lifted, 48% say they would not return to public places until the outbreak is over.
Death, people dying, is the greatest fear.
In Orange, Ohio, the Abramson family has been home for a month. Spencer and Hallie working from home, Leo home from college, Ollie and Max doing online schoolwork.
Yeah, kind of like bouncing off the walls, annoying them.
Staying at home is getting old, they say, but they're in no hurry to go back out.
What will it take for you to feel comfortable going back out again?
I don't know about my kids leaving the house. I don't know when that I'm going to feel safe for them to leave the house.
When people are allowed to leave home, Dan Simons, who co-owns Founding Farmers Restaurants in Potomac, Maryland, is already considering how to make customers feel safe.
I'm ready to have less tables. Maybe it's no seating at the bar. I can imagine where diners use their own devices to look at the menu instead of me handing the same menu to folks over and over. Totally contactless payment, no cash back and forth.
For now, he's focusing on takeout orders and feeding the employees he's laid off.
I laid off 1,100 people on March 16th, and it sounds like a data point, but it's not. That's 1,100. It's 1 + 1 + 1 and their families and their incomes. And so, we got to get people back to work, but we have to do it safely.
These are not easy decisions for business owners or families. Most Americans say the top priority right now should be staying home to slow the spread of the virus.
NBC.
This morning, the death toll in New York State is nearing 1,000. Hospitals are reeling, with New York City's mayor warning they will run out of supplies by this weekend. Now, because of the nature of this pandemic, just how contagious it is, just how fast it moves, and plain technical challenges, we really haven't been able to show you what this crisis looks like on the front lines. That's about to change. CNN has an exclusive look inside a Brooklyn hospital on the front lines of this pandemic. CNN's Miguel Marquez joins us now. And look, Miguel, you and I have both been in actual war zones. The descriptions you give as to what you have seen inside these hospitals, reminiscent to me of actual war zones.
It's funny you say that, because all along in this pandemic, that is what I have been thinking about, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan, in many, many ways, not just the hospitals, but now that I've been to one, certainly the hospitals. We were invited to Brookdale Hospital in the Brownsville area, the neighborhood of Brooklyn. It's largely African-American, it's largely Latino. It's also one of the poorest in the city. On a normal day, they have plenty to keep them busy, but coronavirus has pushed that hospital to the edge.
Every corridor, every corner, every ward, every inch of Brookdale Hospital Medical Center in Brooklyn now inundated with those suffering from COVID-19. What are you looking at on a daily basis? How difficult is this?
Well, this is a war zone. It's a medical war zone. Every day I come in, what I see on a daily basis is pain, despair, suffering, and healthcare disparities.
Through Sunday afternoon, Brookdale said it had at least 100 confirmed cases of COVID-19 with nearly 80 awaiting confirmation. More than 20 people have died so far from the disease. On top of its normal emergency flow, coronavirus is pushing the hospital to the max.
We are scared too. We're fighting for your lives and we're fighting for our own lives. We're trying to keep our head above water and not drown.
Doctors, nurses, even those keeping the floors clean face a rising tide, uncertain how long it will rise, unsure this coronavirus won't sicken them as they struggle to stay a step ahead. What do you need right now?
We need prayer, we need support, we need gowns, we need gloves, we need masks, we need more vents, we need more medical space. We need psychosocial support as well. It's not easy coming here when you know that what you're getting ready to face.
The deaths here filled to capacity. How much room do you have in your morgue?
Usually we have around 20 plus bodies that we can fit comfortably.
And you've gone over that?
Gone over that, and the state has been gracious enough to bring us apparatus to help keep families and keep the bodies in comfortable areas because we didn't want bodies piled on top of each other.
Brookdale needs more of everything. Today, Edward, they chat with them via cell phone. It's sometimes as close as they can get as COVID-19 takes another life. As grim as it is right now, Dr. Mollett expects it will get worse.
It could end in the fall, it could end at the end of the year. But this is why we're begging everyone not just to only put that pressure on the emergency department, but also for everybody to help us to help them by staying home.
You think we're in it for the long haul?
Oh,
This is months, not weeks.
Definitely.
Another worrisome thing she's seeing coming through the doors, not just the elderly and those with compromised immune systems.
I work at 2 hospitals. So I work here in Brooklyn, and then I work at another hospital in the Bronx, and it's the same thing. In the South Bronx, it's the same thing. I've had patients that were in their 30s, and they are now intubated, and they're really sick. I've had patients that are well.
No underlying conditions.
No underlying conditions. So the thing is about between life and death, as far as this coronavirus, is that this virus there's no difference. It has nothing to do with age, has nothing to do with lack of access to health care, has nothing to do with socioeconomics, race, or ethnicity. This virus is killing a lot of people.
Make a mistake, very easy, just from an extra milliliter of reagent. Adding it to the machine can mess up the entire batch. All the 52 specimens, we would have to start all over from the beginning.
I don't really sleep that well at night. I worried about my family. I worry about my safety. I worry about my colleagues. I worry about how the shift is going to be the next time I come. I worry about if a family member is going to come and be a patient as well or fall victim to the coronavirus. I worry about a lot of things.
The disease, a marathon that healthcare workers alone cannot win or even finish.
It's not up to just only to the emergency department to pull through and to make sure the curve is flat. And this is a responsibility for everybody in the country to help us pull through. So
stay the F home.
Exactly. I'm very.
Is that literally? I mean, how?
Stay the F home. Exactly. Because it's not just us that has to help flatten the curve and take care of everybody. Help us help you.
She says it will take everyone pulling together. The worst days, she fears, are still ahead.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It is not right what is going on in America right now. It is not right. I mean, all of it. The public health disaster that we could have mitigated if we had a better president and better leadership, the economic devastation that tens of millions of Americans are now facing. But specifically, the way this country is now failing to honor with dignity and grace the more than 62,000 men and women we have lost. We have all seen the stories about the overwhelming number of fatalities. At one funeral home in Brooklyn, New York, 50 decomposing bodies were found on ice inside 4 trucks, including rental trucks from U-Haul. The funeral director said they were put there because he had no more room in his chapel. I ran out of space, he said. Bodies are coming out of our ears. A cemetery worker, also in Brooklyn, says he is struggling to keep up with the onslaught of bodies.
Sometimes, Ali Maoud arrives as early as 3 a.m. and stays late just to lessen the load for the next day.
15 hours a day, and it's very excruciating.
People tasked with burying the dead cannot keep up with the sheer number of deaths. Because the virus is so contagious and so deadly, many families have not been able to say goodbye to their loved ones in person at the hospital. And they often cannot have traditional funerals or sit shiva or otherwise come together to collectively mourn because of physical distancing rules. It's just a horrible thing to go through. And then come the costs. At a time when many are suddenly out of work, in New Jersey, where 460 deaths were recorded today, a son could not afford the funeral bills for his parents who died 3 days apart. In Chicago, the family of a nurse who contracted the virus had to set up a GoFundMe page to cover her funeral expenses.
She gave what we taught a human touch, a mother's touch. And that she did for everybody. We're all just dumbfounded that this happened.
Here's the thing. It doesn't have to be like this. There's a very simple thing the federal government, our government, can do right now to help. They could step in and pay for burials for those who have fallen. But Donald Trump has not done it. He has not released the money. Now, in the past, after disasters like Hurricane Katrina and Superstorm Sandy, the government has stepped in to cover funeral costs. After 3 hurricanes in 2017, as ProPublica reports, FEMA paid out about $2,700 per approved application. So far, we've lost more than 62,000 men and women to the virus. If the federal government wanted to provide that same amount of money, $2,700 to each of the families of the deceased, so they don't have to go scrounging on GoFundMe to cover funeral costs, it would cost the federal government around $170 million. That's it. At a time when we are spending literally trillions of dollars, $500 billion for big business, tens of billions to the airline industry, tens of millions for the luxury hotel company that owns the Ritz-Carlton in Atlanta. 2 weeks ago, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, both of New York, were calling on the government to step up and do this very, very simple, obvious thing.
The least we can do is help families bury their loved ones in the most impacted communities in America. It is the very least we can do. It is the very core, basic measure of human dignity. And in the richest country in the world, we should be able to allow people to bury their loved ones in dignity.
The least we can do. It is the least we can do, but Trump will not do it. He doesn't need to go through Congress. I want to be clear here. He just needs to authorize FEMA to release the money. As former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate told ProPublica, FEMA does not have the independent ability to turn on the programs at will. It has to come from Trump. In fact, approximately 30 states and territories have requested the funding, but Trump will not free up the money. Now, the president is refusing to take this very simple action as a small grace towards the citizens of this nation. It's unconscionable. And that small little bit of inaction, of utter cold-heartedness, it says everything you need to know about the way he has navigated this crisis from the beginning. As the bodies pile up at funeral homes and the cemetery workers become overwhelmed and the death toll crosses that of the Vietnam War, the president is rage-tweeting in unhinged fashion in the middle of the night. And this afternoon saying things like this.
I don't think anybody's done a better job with testing, with ventilators, with all of the things that we've done. And our death totals, our numbers per million people are really very, very strong. We're very proud of the job we've done.
He just said, the President of the United States just said today, our deaths per million are really very strong. More than 62,000 Americans gone. Thousands more every day, day after day after day after day. He's very proud of the job he's done. They just do not seem to think Americans dying en masse as the federal government looks on is that big a deal. In fact, there's a whole group of the president's supporters who just come out and say, no biggie.
Many people who are dying both here and around the world were on their last legs anyway, and I don't want to sound callous about that.
Oh, you're going to get hold on. You're going to get hammered for that.
I don't care. I mean, a simple man tells the truth.
Simple man tells the truth. Last legs anyway. On Sunday, the Washington Post published a story breaking down what Trump had said in 13 hours of his coronavirus briefings. And while he spent 45 minutes of that praising himself and his administration, he spent only 4.5 minutes. 4.5 minutes out of 13 hours expressing condolences for the victims of the virus. What is happening right now in America is a catastrophe. It's a nightmare. It is cause for mass grief and for national mourning, for flags to be flown at half-mast. Yet the families of the victims have watched their federal government fail them. They have suffered this horrible loss, often without being able to say goodbye or properly mourn. And now, amidst the worst economic contraction since the Great Depression, they are being deprived of the money many need to give some last bit of dignity to their loved ones. And that is not right.
It's one of the deadliest pathogens the world has faced in the last 100 years. Trying to crack the coronavirus code is now the top priority at Fort Detrick, Maryland, in the Homeland Security Biodefense Center. Behind these doors, one of the most secure labs in the country. Researchers in full biohazard suits now working to understand how the coronavirus spreads and infects so easily. I asked senior research scientist Paul Dabish about the pressure knowing so many people have already died.
It's very great, like where we are working around the clock because of that, to try to answer questions that we're being asked about this virus. And hopefully those results can help to inform our response to this. And we know the clock is ticking on this.
Among the most urgent questions, how long does the virus hang in the air and remain infectious? In this aerosol chamber, researchers recreate the sunlight, heat, and humidity levels for any climate in the country, from New York in springtime to Arizona's deserts to Florida's beaches. If the virus can remain airborne, it could potentially spread more easily through hospitals, prisons, meatpacking operations, schools, and nursing homes.
We're most concerned about the really small droplets that you can't see, because those are the ones that get down deep into your lung. And for most infectious agents, that's when you get the worst possible infection.
Those could be deadly.
Those could be deadly.
Droplets smaller than a human hair. Researchers already know the virus can survive on cardboard for 24 hours, plastic and steel for 3 days, glass for 4 days. Last month, this lab announced that common household disinfectants can quickly kill the virus. But another critical discovery received less attention. The pathogen does not survive well in direct sunlight and at certain humidity levels.
What we have found so far is that sunlight seems to be very detrimental to the virus. And so within minutes, the majority of the virus is inactivated on surfaces and in the air in direct sunlight.
That could mean the virus would die quickly on anything left outside, from playground equipment to backyard furniture to shopping carts. It's not clear whether sunlight kills the virus on skin.
Our preliminary results say yes, that the sunlight on plastic will inactivate the virus very quickly.
Potential good news for anyone anxious to get outside. Researchers say the fact that this virus dies quickly in direct sunlight but can live for days on surfaces inside could directly affect how Americans live and play this summer.
Tonight, the mysterious illness taking a tragic turn after a 5-year-old boy in New York died from the rare syndrome thought to be linked to COVID-19. Other deaths now under investigation, including a 7-year-old just north of the city.
So caution to all people who, again, may have believed that their child couldn't be affected by COVID.
New York is now reporting 73 cases of what is being called pediatric multi-system inflammatory syndrome. NBC News has found at least 8 other states and Washington, D.C. have also seen the rare complication, marked by fever, rashes, red eyes, or upset stomach. Some children even go into cardiac arrest. Children's Hospital of Michigan sent out an alert to pediatricians after seeing more than a dozen cases. And Louisiana's Ochsner Hospital saw 2 new cases in its ICU this week.
It's not going to be something subtle. It's going to be kids who really barely want to communicate with you, have really high fevers.
In this new inflammatory syndrome, symptoms can appear weeks after exposure to the virus.
The scariest part of it was that nobody seemed to know how COVID or this inflammatory disease are related.
Many children like Jack McMorrow have no pre-existing conditions and no coronavirus symptoms before developing the inflammation.
I couldn't even move. I was in so much pain in my legs.
It took 2 tests before Jack came back positive for COVID-19. He spent more than a week in the ICU at New York Presbyterian Columbia.
I'm glad to be alive.
Like most children affected by the syndrome, Jack recovered, but tonight he has a warning.
Do not overlook this. You will die.
The mysterious illness is rare, but doctors still don't know which children might be at greatest risk. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News, New York.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
The race is on for a vaccine, and Mike, his doctors asked us not to use his last name to protect his privacy, has already left the starting block. He and 11 others were recently injected with a trial vaccine at a lab in Kansas City.
I got a shot, so we'll see what happens.
Mike is a maintenance engineer at the lab complex doing the trials. He still lives at home with his family, but is under close medical observation for 28 weeks.
So your energy is good?
Yes, yes.
The vaccine in Mike's body is being produced by a Pennsylvania-based company called Inovio. Their approach is to inject part of the virus's DNA code to fool our bodies into thinking we've been infected for real and start producing virus-fighting antibodies.
I think we're very optimistic in our vaccine's ability to be safe and potentially effective.
The Gates Foundation gave $5 million to support the research.
A miracle therapeutic or the vaccine are the only thing that we'll be able to say, okay, we're back to normal.
Mike told us he was inspired to be an early volunteer after a friend died, he thinks, from COVID-19, and to help his family.
If this works out, and this trial that you're on,
when it works out.
When it works out, how are you going to feel then?
You hear everybody say this is the new normal. I don't want this to be the new normal. I want this to be an inconvenience, and then we can get back to normal.
Inovio is one of several companies around the world working toward a vaccine. Experts caution none of the approaches is guaranteed to work and carry risks, which is why so many safety checks are required before any potential vaccine is mass distributed.
Meanwhile, is sharpening his criticism of China tonight after a U.S. intelligence report found China hid the severity of the outbreak and then hoarded vital medical supplies. So will the U.S. take action? Here's our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl.
To President Trump, there is no doubt who is to blame for the coronavirus pandemic.
It came from China. It should have been stopped. It could have been stopped on the spot. They chose not to do it, or something happened. Either there was incompetence or they didn't do it for some reason. And we're going to have to find out what that reason was.
The U.S. is accusing China of covering up just how devastating the virus was when it first hit. A report by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, obtained by ABC News, concludes, quote, the Chinese government intentionally concealed the severity of COVID-19 from the international community in early January while it stockpiled medical supplies. And over the weekend, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told ABC's Martha Raddatz that he has seen evidence that the virus came from this lab in Wuhan, China, a theory pushed by the president as well.
And, Mr. Secretary, have you seen anything that gives you high confidence that it originated in that Wuhan lab?
Martha, there's enormous evidence that that's where this began. I can tell you that there is a significant amount of evidence that this came from that laboratory in Wuhan.
But the administration has not made any evidence public. When asked if the virus spread was accidental or intentional, Secretary Pompeo said he could not answer. The director of national intelligence has said the intelligence community is investigating, quote, whether the outbreak began through contact with infected animals or if it was the result of an accident at a laboratory in Wuhan. The Chinese government knows it's not just Donald Trump placing blame. According to Reuters, the Chinese Ministry of State Security has reported to Chinese leaders that anti-China sentiment around the world is at its highest level since the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. So high, the report says, that China should be prepared for the possibility of war with the United States.
Those were some bold words, but as you point out, John, the critique isn't just from the U.S. when it comes to China. And John, with us live from D.C., and the Secretary of State, we all watched, telling Martha the U.S. is going to hold China accountable. So what is the White House saying tonight about any possible retaliation?
Well, the president said on Friday that he wants to find out what happened before making a decision on retaliation. And just yesterday, the president was asked if new tariffs on China could be part of any retaliation. And he said, quote, "We're all playing a very complicated game of chess or poker." So the bottom line, David, it's unclear what exactly he has in mind.
All right, we'll wait and watch. John Carl, thank you.
We're going to get to our exclusive interview with President Trump. World News Tonight anchor David Muir had his temperature checked before sitting down with the president, and they sat at a very safe distance, 11 feet apart. The president in Arizona for his first major trip in nearly 2 months, and acknowledging the risk of reopening country, but vowing we're going to get back to normal.
I want to start with reopening the country. I know this is your first trip back out into the country
Yes.
in quite some time. And you've said that the decision to open the economy is the biggest decision I've ever had to make. How do you, and I suppose this is the central question, how do you save livelihoods without risking more lives?
Well, I think actually the decision to close the country was the biggest decision I've ever had to make. And I've said that very loud and clear. I mean, we had the greatest economy in history, in the history of the world, not only our economy, it was our greatest economy. Best employment numbers, best numbers in every single way. And they said, "Sir, we have to close the country." I said, "What are you talking about, close the country?" Because nobody's ever heard of such a thing. And we saved millions of lives by doing it. And by putting the ban on China very early was a big thing. But the biggest decision I've ever had to make is closing the country. And certainly this is now also a big decision, but the people want to go back to work.
I want to ask you about what Dr. Fauci said last night about the reopening of the country. He said it's the balance of something that's a very difficult choice. How many deaths and how much suffering are you willing to accept to get back where you want to be? Do you see it that way? Do you believe that's the reality we're facing, that lives will be lost to reopen the country?
It's possible there will be some, because you won't be locked into an apartment or a house or whatever it is. But at the same time, we're going to practice social distancing. We're going to be washing hands. We're going to be doing a lot of the things that we've learned to do over the last period of time. And we have to get our country back.
Let me ask you about testing.
Yeah.
Right now in America. You know, early on there were hurdles. Dr. Fauci at the time acknowledged it was a failing. But for Americans who do want to go back to work, should they be able to have access to a test now? Should they know whether they've been exposed to the virus? Should they know if somebody's at the workplace asymptomatic and they simply don't know? Or do they have to go back to work having faith in their leaders and you, Mr. President, that the workplace will be safe?
Yeah. No, they don't. They have to test if they want. You know, some people are strong believers in testing.
So right now, for any American worker who's nervous about going back, if they want to get tested to see if they've been exposed to the virus, they can have access to both the antibody tests.
They should have no problem.
And
they should have no problem. And as good as this is, we're even getting better. We came up, don't forget, the cupboard was bare. The other administration, the last administration, left us nothing. We didn't have ventilators. We didn't have medical equipment. We didn't have testing. The tests were broken. You saw that. We had broken tests. They left us nothing. And we've taken it and we have built an incredible stockpile, a stockpile like we've never had before.
Many people have heard you say that along the way and have wondered, though, you know, you're 3 years into your first term.
Yeah.
You're now applying for the job again. What did you do when you became president to restock those cupboards that you say were bare?
Well, I'll be honest, I have a lot of things going on. We had a lot of people that refused to allow the country to be successful. They wasted a lot of time on Russia. That turned out to be a total hoax. Then they did Ukraine, and that was a total hoax. Then they impeached the President of the United States for absolutely no reason.
There were 2 new studies out in the last 24 hours. One was from Johns Hopkins that said the death rate could double if we're not careful with this reopening of America by June, the daily death rate. The University of Washington saying we could have 135,000 Americans dead by August. What do you make of those numbers, Mr. President?
A couple of things. First of all, these models have been so wrong from day one, both on the low side and the upside. They've been so wrong. They've been so out of whack. And they keep making new models, and they're wrong. Those models that you're mentioning are talking about without mitigation.
But let me ask you, because you've responded to those 2 new studies out with these forecasts, your own numbers have shifted over time.
They have.
You said 60,000 Americans could die. That's what you said last week. I watched your town hall over the weekend. You said 75, 80 to 100,000 people could die. Which models are you looking at? And what should Americans be prepared for as we reopen the country and head into the fall where we could see a potential second wave?
Well, the upper number was, as you know, 2.2 million people. And then there are some models or charts that showed higher than that. But 2.2 million people. I always felt 60, 65, 70, as horrible as that is. I mean, you're talking about filling up Yankee Stadium with death. So I thought it was horrible. But it's probably going to be somewhat higher than that.
Let me ask you, because people will look back, and we have an election 6 months from now. They're going to look back to the beginning of this, and they're going to wonder what you knew and when you knew it. And I have no interest in going back over everything you said, but there was one thing you said that perhaps you could clarify. You said this was at the end of February. A full month had gone by. You'd stopped travel from China. And you said of the cases here in the U.S., when you have 15 people and when the 15 within a couple of days is going to go down to 0, that's a pretty good job we've done. Help me understand that moment. Did you really think we were going to have 15 cases in the U.S.?
So let me, I said you would say worse than that. I said one person one time, and it's true. There was a time when we had one person in this country. We knew about it, we worked on it, but we had one person, it mushroomed, the 15 people mushroomed. Other people were coming in also from Europe. Don't forget.
But we're at more than 1 million cases now.
But don't forget, in January, okay, let's talk about cases. You know why you're at 1 million cases? Because we have more testing than anybody else. If we tested as much as these countries down here, okay, who don't do very much testing at all.
I understand the argument you're making.
But look at your question.
No, but you understand there's a huge disparity between 15 and more than 1 million cases. What was it, an intelligence failure? Where was the breakdown that we didn't know the scope of this?
Look, let me tell you this. I closed the border, if you want to use that term. I banned people from coming into China.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you one more question about the nearly 70,000 Americans whose lives have been lost. Grandparents, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters.
Right.
We've lost more people now than we lost in the Vietnam War. What do you want to say to those families tonight?
I want to say I love you. I want to say that we're doing everything we can. There is nobody, I don't sleep at nights thinking about it. There is nobody that's taken it harder than me. But at the same time, I have to get this enemy defeated. And that's what we're doing, David. That's what we're doing. We're going to open safely and quickly, I hope, because we have to get our country back.
The president is pressing states to end stay-at-home orders. And by tomorrow, 33 states will have begun the process of at least partial reopening after federal social distancing guidelines expired on Thursday.
Mother's Day's coming up. Your mama told you to wash your hands and cover your nose and mouth if you cough. As long as we do those simple things and use common sense, we ought to be just fine.
They did misleading pictures acting like, this was like Lollapalooza on the beach or something like that. Has there been some type of major outbreak? No.
But in Michigan, where armed demonstrators stormed the Capitol this week,
swastikas and Confederate flags, nooses and automatic rifles do not represent who we are as Michiganders. Nothing that I want more than to just flip a switch and return to normal. But that's not how it's going to work, unfortunately.
On Tuesday, the president promised to meet the testing benchmark set by a Harvard study.
You're saying you're confident you can surpass 5 million tests per day? Is that?
Well, we're going to be there very soon.
On Wednesday, he walked that back.
I didn't say it, but somebody came out with a report saying 5 million. I think that was from the Harvard report. But we are going to be there at a certain point.
Even so, the president and his political aides are trying to recast the federal response to the pandemic as a success story.
We did all the right moves. I think we did a spectacular job. We have saved thousands and thousands of lives. I can even make that, if you want, hundreds of thousands of lives.
The government, federal government, rose to the challenge, and this is a great success story.
The language is nothing new. For months, as the death toll has risen, the president has declared in some form or another, mission accomplished.
When you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero, that's a pretty good job we've done. As we near the end of our historic battle with the invisible enemy, we can begin the next front in our war, which we are calling Opening Up America Again.
Back in late February, you predicted that the number of cases would go down to 0. How did we get from your prediction of 0 to 1 million?
Well, it will go down to 0 ultimately.
President's own public health experts warn against reopening too quickly.
You can't just leap over things and get into a situation where you're really tempting a rebound.
But perhaps motivated by the political calendar, the White House is presenting a rosier timeline.
Early summer, we could be in a much better place as a nation.
May is the transition month, May and June probably.
By June, a lot of the country should be back to normal.
We begin tonight with several states moving to reopen and the urgent challenge now facing America: how to restart the economy without putting more lives at risk. New images tonight showing thousands packing beaches in Southern California as temperatures there soar. The governor pleading for them to maintain social distancing. Protesters gathering at a San Diego beach today demanding it be reopened. In Georgia, salons, barbershops, and gyms back open this weekend. Several other states set to ease restrictions this week. At the same time, Americans still lining up for food. These images from Chelsea, Massachusetts. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announcing another 367 lives lost in 24 hours, though that is the lowest one-day total since March 31st. The race continues to increase testing in this country for antibodies and for new cases. It is a critical moment in the COVID-19 fight, and ABC's Marcus Moore leads our coverage from West Texas.
Tonight, the growing pressure to reopen America nearing a boiling point. Thousands flocking to beaches, some defying stay-at-home orders. A searing heat wave putting big crowds in this open beach in Orange County, California, making it nearly impossible to social distance.
This is America!
In San Diego, police arresting at least 3 protesters for violating stay-at-home orders. In Georgia, some businesses starting to reopen on Friday, including barbershops, salons, and gyms. Mike Martino now requiring everyone in his gym to wear masks and spray down the machines with sanitizer. He says they had to reopen.
They have families, they have to feed their children, they have bills to pay, they have mortgages, they have car payments. So we really wanted to start to get in so we could start getting some funds back into their pockets so they can actually, get back to some type of normalcy.
Georgia not alone. South Carolina and Oklahoma lifting their orders already. And starting Monday, some businesses will reopen in Arkansas, Colorado, Mississippi, and Montana. Tennessee's orders expire on Thursday, but the state is allowing some businesses to reopen on Monday. Ohio and Texas lifting some restrictions on Thursday.
The time has come to stop living in fear.
In Texas, Dallas salon owner Shelley Luther vowing to remain open in defiance of state orders, tearing up a citation she received.
I could be used as an example, or they'll go away, or I don't know. I'm not going to shut down.
In Colleyville, the mayor also undermining the governor's order, allowing some businesses to reopen ahead of the current plan.
It's time to reopen our businesses and help those who have been badly hurt by the shutdown.
At Gloria's Latin Cuisine, people are flooding into the restaurant.
We've actually had some people drive from surrounding communities coming all the way to our Colleyville location.
Large groups gathering at this cafe, waiters wearing masks, and tables separated by 6 feet.
Today, actually, I'm feeling very good. We got people coming in.
Across the country, demonstrators rallying, armed protesters in St. Paul, and scenes like this in Providence and Las Vegas.
I think the economic health is extremely important, and that's why we have to do this right the first time.
Some governors also hesitant. In states like Maryland, which saw its deadliest day since the outbreak began, warning it is too early.
I want to get our economy back open just as soon as we can, but I want to do so in a safe
way. Michigan's governor defending her extension of the state's stay-at-home order to May 15th.
We know that no one wants a second wave. It would be devastating for the health of our people and for our economy. And so we've got to be really smart as we re-engage.
And tonight, a glimpse of what the future might look like when states do reopen.
Desks will be further apart. We'll see, hopefully, color coding on the floor as to where you walk and where you don't walk. We have to provide that safe 6 feet for every employee.
This real estate company testing new layouts to make sure employees are safe in the workplace.
The one thing I can tell you for sure is that the new normal will be anything but normal.
All right, Marcus Moore joins us now from West Texas. And Marcus, we saw those images of packed restaurants in Colleyville in your report, and the governor of Texas planning to make a big announcement tomorrow.
Yeah, Tom, you see those images from Colleyville. They clearly suggest a lot of people there are eager to get their lives back to normal, but still a lot of residents there say it is irresponsible to try to reopen so soon. Tomorrow, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is expected to announce the plans to begin reopening the state. Tom.
Marcus Moore leading us off tonight. Marcus, thank you for that.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here as we start another week together, another week, another test for America and our leaders at the state level, at the federal level. How do you reopen America, save jobs without risking lives? Tonight, at least 38 states have now eased restrictions, even though many of these states have not met guidelines from the president and his own team. And the new preliminary analysis developed for the government and obtained by the New York Times that estimates the number of daily deaths from the virus could double by June 1st to 3,000 a day. What the White House is saying about this tonight as the president revises his own toll numbers. And this evening, the numbers we have already seen in this country, more than 68,000 lives lost. Across this country, the pressure to lift restrictions is mounting every day. People crowded into New York's Central Park there, leading to the question, is the U.S. moving too quickly? The beaches in Clearwater, Florida. Tensions boiling over in Austin. A Texas park ranger pushed into a lake while asking a group to spread apart. And in New York City, an undercover officer involved in this altercation while making an arrest for alleged violations of social distancing. Today, hundreds of protesters were at the Massachusetts State House calling for an end to restrictions, a state where the outbreak is still at its peak. And in California, late today, Governor Gavin Newsom now saying he will ease some restrictions on businesses later this week. There's also word tonight the food supply in this country, the major grocery store chains now saying they will begin to ration meat. What's driving this? And we'll get to it all in just a moment as we begin this new week. And we begin tonight with ABC's Tom Yamas right here in New York.
Tonight, as much of America wrestles to reopen, the New York Times obtaining a preliminary analysis about what could happen if social distancing rules are relaxed. The report provided to FEMA to aid in scenario planning paints a stark image of what may lay ahead. The data put together by Johns Hopkins shows the number of Americans dying every day from the coronavirus could nearly double by June 1st, 3,000 a day, and cases could soar from 25,000 to 200,000 a day. The White House says the data does not reflect modeling and has not been vetted by its coronavirus task force. But the president now acknowledging the death toll could climb to 100,000.
We're going to lose anywhere from 75, 80 to 100,000 people. That's a horrible thing.
But as the country starts to reopen and more Americans pack parks and beaches, the challenge now, how to protect the public. And in some cases, temperatures are reaching a boiling point. In Flint, Michigan, Calvin Munnerlin, 43, a father of 8 and a security guard, allegedly killed after a dispute over a customer not wearing a mask. A family of 3 now charged with murder.
It is incredibly sad that in this crisis that this life was lost. And I ask that all Michiganders do the right thing, keep their wits about them.
In Texas, this park ranger informing a crowd about social distancing shoved into the water at Lake Austin. 25-year-old Brandon Hicks arrested and charged with attempted assault. And in New York, police launching an internal investigation after this video surfaced showing the arrest of 3 people allegedly violating social distancing orders on Saturday. Today, dense crowds in Boston at this protest at the State House. the White House coronavirus response coordinator, concerned about the risk at those rallies like this one in Michigan.
It's devastatingly worrisome to me personally, because if they go home and infect their grandmother or their grandfather who has a comorbid condition and they have a serious or an unfortunate outcome, they will feel guilty for the rest of our lives.
38 states now easing restrictions.
There's not too many states that I know of that are going up. Almost everybody is headed in the right direction. I think most of the numbers are coming down. We're on the right side of it.
But in 17 states, the virus is still surging. Some of those states opening up have not seen the recommended 14-day decline in cases. And the virus's deadly march felt all over the country. In Chicago, 22-year-old mother Nyla Moore losing her fight with the virus after 3 weeks on a ventilator. Her dream was to teach children with special needs. In Las Vegas, Veronica Wells and her husband are balancing mounting bills and coronavirus fears. She's terrified of her husband returning to work at a homeless shelter.
We really don't have any options. He's 50 years old. He's got asthma. He's got a compromised immune system. So it's just very scary.
For doctors on the front lines like Umesh Gidawani at New York's Mount Sinai Hospital, there is worry about the patients right in front of him and the weeks ahead.
Are we going to see spikes coming back, especially as we start to relax and loosen some of the restrictions that we are used to?
That is a question everyone is asking. Tom with us again tonight. And Tom, you reported there on that new preliminary analysis first reported in the New York Times showing the potential new numbers. But there was something else today that caught our attention. The number 2 official at the CDC who seemed to be saying the government didn't act quickly enough to stop the virus as it was spreading from Europe.
That's right, David. Dr. Ann Schuchat, the number 2 at the CDC, says limited testing and delayed travel alerts with Europe helped drive the outbreak here in the U.S. She says in February alone, 2 million people traveled from Italy and other European countries. The travel ban did not start with those countries until March 11th. Dr. Schuchat writing, we clearly didn't recognize the full importations that were happening. David.
50,780. At last check, that's how many lives have been lost in this country to COVID-19 in just over 1 month. Just to give that some perspective, the seating capacity at Yankee Stadium, just over 50,000. And think of it this way. It's also more people than the number of Americans killed during 9/11, the Afghanistan, Iraq, and Korean wars all combined. As that death toll continues to rise, several states are rolling the dice in a move to jumpstart their economies. It's a gamble that could pay off, or one we may all regret. It's a critical moment for states like Georgia, home of the world's busiest airport, where the governor has issued guidelines to open up. Our Steve Osunsami leads us off from Atlanta with what's happening there and what it could mean for the rest of us.
Let's get this started, right?
This is reopening day in Atlanta after weeks of trying to pay her bills with empty pockets and closed doors at her hair salon. Small business owner Regina Herschel was excited and nervous today.
When the governor announced it, what was your feeling when you heard that?
Oh my goodness. I was excited because I felt like, oh my God, now I have a chance to at least try to work so that way I can provide for my family. So I was excited about it, even though I am still nervous. That's a natural feeling. I'm nervous when I go to the supermarket. So it's the same kind of nervousness, but I still have to work.
She still has to work with rubber gloves, a plastic shield, and a mask under that. And on this first day of a return to commerce, she was booked solid. This was her first customer in more than a month.
I trust my stylist to take the necessary precautions to keep me safe, and that's what she does. And then just listening to, the news and the media that tell us what to do to stay safe. So I'm not nervous about the process at all.
At some barbershops, people were standing in lines outside. They weren't allowed to stand in the shops. In the Atlanta suburbs, partners Mark Damaso and Brent Upton are reopening today too.
We're only allowing one client at a time per stylist. Our stations are already 6 feet apart, so we're covered there. No one will be allowed in the salon while they're waiting. No one allowed in the salon with the person who's getting a service. So if they have anybody with them, they'll have to stay in their car. We're going to text our clients to come in once we've sanitized and prepared for them per client.
They spent 24 years building their business and nearly lost it after 5 weeks of empty chairs at their salon. They're pre-screening clients for colds and coughs on the phone
and taking temperatures when they arrive.
If you thought the toilet paper situation was crazy, wait till 300 million people want a haircut at the same time. So,
And that's what's happening.
yes,
But you guys are booked for 3
solid weeks straight.
Wow.
Since the salon is reopening, we want to go ahead and get all of those rebooked. So just give us a shout.
When the governor was announcing, it was Monday, before he finished getting it out of his mouth, our phones were blowing up. Texts, calls, I want to be the first, I want to be in, because we had 5 weeks of clients that missed their appointments and they all went back in.
This was the announcement Monday from Georgia's governor, saying that based on a flattening of coronavirus cases, declining ER visits, and enhanced testing, it's now safe to begin reopening certain businesses with specific restrictions.
We will allow gyms, fitness centers, bowling alleys, body art studios, barbers, cosmetologists, hair designers, nail care artists, estheticians, their respective schools, and massage therapists to reopen their doors this Friday.
And the governor has plenty of supporters, and some who didn't even vote for him, who point out that grocery stores, post offices, and home improvement stores are already open and crowded.
So I don't think it's too soon, no. I think it's about right on time.
I tell you, you know, what's worse, going to a grocery store and walking down aisles with people, or whether it's being on your own bowling alley lane. I mean, we're not saying these businesses can, you know, start having large gatherings at the bowling alley.
But at least one of the models health officials used to track the virus says that Georgia won't reach its greatest number of hospitalizations from the coronavirus until next week.
I worry less about models. I worry more about the reality. And right now, the reality is that we still have cases in the state. We still have a virus that is transmissible. And my recommendation to people is continue practicing social distancing, continue being vigilant, continue doing as little as possible, stay at home as much as you can. And the reality is you can prevent this from infecting you and infecting your family.
President Trump, a friend of the governor's, has even said that the state is opening too soon.
And I want the state to open, but I wasn't happy with Brian Kemp. I will tell you that right now.
The mayor of Atlanta wasn't happy either. She closed the city before the governor closed the state, and his new order overrules hers. Her city is home to the busiest airport on the planet that is now a ghost town. She says preventing an outbreak here is especially important.
There is nothing essential about going to a bowling alley or getting a manicure in the middle of a pandemic.
What many are now learning is that the governor of Georgia and so many other states are under immense economic pressure. On the day he announced the reopening, Governor Kemp was seeing the numbers in this new report. It shows that if the stay-home orders continued, the state government itself would wind up nearly $3 billion in the hole on top of $1 billion that the state is already behind. George Cheedy, a public policy analyst, says that the state unemployment fund could have run out.
And I don't think George is alone. I think every governor in the country is about to have the same calculation, and the only question is how much money can they borrow and how much money did they already have in their unemployment fund.
Okay, now give me your personal opinion on whether you still think this is wise.
No, I think it's terrible because it undermines the rationale for public health decisions driving the question that we've got to face. Like either we are doing what the epidemiologists and the scientists say we should be doing, or we are not. Either we're putting public health first or we are not. If we're worrying about this before we're worrying about the health of a nail salon technician or an esthetician or somebody who works at a bowling alley, then we are saying that those lives matter less than whether or not our coffers are full.
A new ABC News Ipsos poll shows that 72% of Americans believe that moving too quickly to loosen stay-at-home orders is a greater threat to the country than moving too slowly. And 80% say they're unlikely to head out to public spaces that draw crowds. This is why Federico Castellucci says he's not opening his 7 restaurants for dine-in service come Monday, even though he can.
If we wanted to open tomorrow, we could open tomorrow. But the fact of the matter is it's got to be driven by the safety and the concerns of our team and our guests and the community, and just doing the right thing.
Even though you could make a lot more money opening.
Yeah, I mean, as it stands right now, I mean, we're not making money every day we're in business. We're literally just here to try to survive another day and pay our staff. But
Ford Fry also runs some of the largest and most popular restaurants in town. He says his staff is thanking him for keeping his dining rooms closed.
We got the news that we're allowed to open. Our gut and my gut, I'd say, and my whole team was like, we are excited that we want to open. We want to jumpstart the economy. We want to get things going, and we want to do our part and get our staff back working. But it was just the vibe in the city or the climate was that no one's ready to go out yet.
Mary Moore runs the Cook's Warehouse stores. She's had to lay off more than 40 people, and she too says it's not yet time to open her cooking schools. She's trying her hardest to sell online and limit the number of customers in her 2 stores.
I think the reopening, it feels premature. I mean, none of my staff is comfortable operating in a way differently than we are right now. I certainly wouldn't reopen the cooking schools. I don't think our customers are ready to come flooding back in the doors. And so you can say we're open, but it's very different from actually being open. But the pressure that it creates to say that, I think is dangerous.
Late Thursday night, Georgia's governor shared more guidelines for businesses that were reopening the next morning, limiting restaurants to no more than 10 people for every 500 square feet of dining room space, no more than 6 people a party. And at movie theaters, which are also allowed to open on Monday, people have to be seated at least 6 feet apart. The governor says he will enforce these guidelines and says if none of this works and there's an explosion of COVID-19 cases, he'll revisit keeping businesses open.
Experience flare-ups anywhere, we now have the tools to deal with that.
Georgia isn't alone. Oklahoma, Minnesota, South Carolina, Alaska, and other states are reopening some businesses today, over the weekend, and Monday. You can argue over the timing of it all, but there's no debate over the feeling. There is something emotionally relieving about escaping from our homes and our fears, where we can enjoy the little moments and possibly get back to our lives. Critics of the Georgia governor say he's taking a gamble with public health, but even his critics are hopeful that he's right.
Restaurants, those specific memories, special occasions, specific dishes, moments are, something that we took for granted a little bit, and so I think when the time comes for those days to come back, I think people are going to be more appreciative. There'll be more gratitude.
We're joined now live by Steve Osunsami. Steve, you mentioned that ABC poll. The vast majority of Americans say that they support stay-at-home orders. From what you're hearing, do you think that reflects the general mood in Georgia?
I do. I think most people here agree with the respondents of that poll. But I will say that the minority opinion might be a little greater here because there are significant concerns about the economy. You've got a lot more people who need more help and a lot more people on those unemployment rolls that are a big concern to the state.
And how are lawmakers in states like Georgia balancing the desire to reopen with the reality that cases continue to rise?
I think that's the question. That's the problem. There isn't really an answer to that, and it's up to different authorities. Each governor is going to sort of make decisions based on the information that's presented to them, and some are going to decide to lean more in the direction of the economy, and others are going to decide to lean more in the direction of being concerned about the health risks. But at some point, we're all going to have to get together and figure out how we're going to best get our lives started over again.
Talking now about the road to recovery. After months of suffering, of heartache, of unimaginable loss, things in Italy are starting gradually to come back to life. Our James Longman is in Italy with a closer look at their new normal.
It's been a long time coming, an emotional moment for these Italian grandparents and their granddaughter. Just a few weeks ago, it would have been normal. Now, it's a celebration of freedom and of family. Today, after months of being apart, Domenico and Maria Antonia finally reunited with their 5-year-old granddaughter, Cecilia.
Disperati, la quarantena l'abbiamo passata disperati. Adesso non riesco neanche a parlare, sono troppo emozionato. 2 mesi che non la vediamo, è solo videochiamata, però non è lo stesso, non può essere lo stesso.
For many, Italy seems to be finally turning the tide. The once desolate streets of Italy's major cities are starting to show signs of coming back to life.
È
è una liberazione e poi vedere il verde, i fiori è qualcosa di indescrivibile, la gioia che mi procura. Sì, è proprio bella.
Restrictions eased to allow a return to work for some 4.5 million people. Construction and manufacturing back, parks open. New life for a country where death seemed to have no end. One of the first and most deadly outbreaks outside China, the toll heartbreaking. With more than 200,000 cases and nearly 30,000 dead, this was a trauma that will take time to heal. The town of Bergamo was one of the hardest hit.
This is the road on which military vehicles were pictured carrying the bodies of the dead from the cemetery out of town. It was a key moment, really, that woke this country up to the true scale of the crisis. But the mayor here says that the death toll may be as much as 5 times what's been reported.
Bergamo's hospital, the focus of global panic.
It was almost an apocalypse, and dozens of patients a day.
Dr. Roberto Consentini runs the emergency unit. The world saw overwhelmed.
When was the moment that you really realized something serious was happening?
When I saw with my eyes several patients all over the emergency room with the helmet and with oxygen all over. Every room was full, filled with patients with difficult breathing. So in that moment I realized that it could have been terrible. Because I think that figures talk to the brain, but images talk to the heart. In that moment, I realized that preparedness was everything.
For so long, Italy's dead were buried without ceremony. Now, small funerals are allowed once more, some dignity restored. This is a cautious first step. Documentation is still needed to go outside, masks and gloves required on public transport in some areas. The danger of the virus returning is very real.
The second peak is always a possibility, and this is why we haven't closed everything about COVID departments, because we want to be ready. But I personally think that the difference is that this time we will be more prepared.
As Italy starts to come out of its crisis, people are now starting to work out just how it could have gotten so bad in this part of the country. And one theory is to look for moments when thousands of people congregated at the same time, like, for example, at a soccer match. Well, one took place here at around about the same time that Italy discovered its first case. And who were they playing? A team in Spain, Valencia, and cases from here in Italy and that part of Spain were linked.
And Italy now has time to understand the long-term impact to COVID patients.
Fatigue and probably depression will be major challenges. We are afraid of seeing even neurological consequences of the disease, which are not well understood at the moment, but we know that the virus penetrates into the nervous system.
Despite the challenges, there's hope now.
And what's it like for you now? Finally, you're getting time to breathe?
Yes, we have time to breathe now. So yes, for example, some of us have taken some day off just to rest because it was really, really heavy to work in these conditions. Now the situation is better. Yesterday we closed our intensive care department. That was for us a great success.
Sylvia, like so many others, taking the time to appreciate small victories and the moments that count.
And James Longman joins us now in Italy with more. James, certainly a lot of good signs, as we just saw, but Italy still faces plenty of challenges over the next 3 months, including reopening schools and also a drop in tourism.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, Lindsay? Each country says that they've kind of got the science to back up their approach, and yet each country seems to want to go their own way. I was in Sweden and Denmark just a couple of weeks ago, and the Danish minister there was saying the science is telling us that we need to lock down, and yet just over the border in Sweden, the Swedish health minister was saying, well, we don't need a lockdown, and it's kind of the same here in Italy. I think one area that hasn't moved a muscle is tourism, and a lot of people have been messaging me today, people I know and people I don't know, asking me just when they can come and take their vacations in Italy. The answer to that question is not anytime soon. Like I said, Italy wants to make sure that there is no chance of a second wave before it moves forward. It wants to get there. It's just being very, very careful.
But the good news for Italy, I guess, is that there is a desire for people to return. James Longman, our thanks to you. Big new numbers keep coming in the COVID-19 pandemic. The coronavirus has now killed more than 75,000 people in the United States and infected well over 1.2 million people, including someone whose work in the White House has brought him near President Trump. And millions more American jobs have been destroyed. William Brangham begins our coverage.
In a tsunami of closings, more than 33 million Americans have now lost their jobs to the pandemic. That includes 3.2 million just in the last week. Some would have been working in places like Ocean City, Maryland, usually packed with visitors and beachgoers, but now a virtual ghost town. Anna Dolly Bushnell owns a candy shop on the boardwalk.
We went from 35 employees down to 5. We had to lay off pretty much everybody, anybody that was in manufacturing, anybody that was waiting on customers, they're all gone just because our doors are all shuttered.
Small businesses aren't the only casualty. Major retailers Neiman Marcus and J. Crew have now filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. And one of the country's oldest department stores, Lord & Taylor, announced it will liquidate its stores when they reopen. All that lost business is also robbing states of tax revenue. California today projected a budget shortfall of more than $54 billion this year, after running a $21 billion surplus a year ago. Governor Gavin Newsom.
We really need the federal government to do more and to help us through this moment. We'll do everything we are responsible for doing and more. We punch above our weight in this state. We'll come back stronger, more vibrant, more resilient than ever.
But exactly when states expect to reopen for business differs from region to region. So far, about half of all states have begun easing restrictions. Much of the West Coast and Northeast remain shuttered, while many states in the Southeast and Midwest have partially reopened. In Montana, students at a handful of small rural schools were back in the classroom today. They're among the first in the country to open back up. The Associated Press reported the Trump administration shelved a 17-page document from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that offered guidelines to states, cities, and businesses for how to safely reopen. It was seen as a blueprint for making site-specific decisions for everything from schools and churches to restaurants and daycare centers. The recommendations were to have been published last Friday, but the AP reported CDC scientists were told it would, quote, never see the light of day. White House officials said today the CDC's guidance had not yet been approved by CDC leadership. Separately, the White House confirmed that one of the president's personal valets had tested positive for the coronavirus. Officials said both the president and the vice president have now been tested again and are still negative for the virus. President Trump was asked about it during an afternoon event.
So we test once a week. Now we're going to go testing once a day. I've had very little personal contact with this gentleman. Know who he is, good person, but I've had very little contact. Mike has had very little contact with him.
Overseas today, the Bank of England warned that the British economy faces its sharpest economic downturn since 1706, back when Europe was engulfed in the War of the Spanish Succession. Russia reported yet another record daily spike in infections, with more than 11,000 new cases. But in China, the original epicenter of the outbreak, all regions have now been downgraded to low risk, with no new deaths being reported in more than 3 weeks. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham.
After scenes like these in California, where stores defied stay-at-home orders, tonight more states eased restrictions to jumpstart local economies. Today, construction resumed in Michigan. Tomorrow in Iowa, dental services and tanning facilities can get back to business. Most of the country partially reopening by Sunday.
We got to get going, man. We got to open up some stuff.
The national shift towards a new normal comes as the death toll in New York tops 20,000. New data shows 66% of recent COVID-19 hospital admissions are from residents who say they had been staying home.
Maybe we were going to find a higher percentage of essential employees who were getting sick. That's not the case.
With new cases surging in states like Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin, health experts say expect a spike in COVID cases as states loosen restrictions.
If it really picks up, it's very hard to stop again.
In California, where statewide hospitalizations are flat, the number of positive cases here in Los Angeles is up, and the state lockdown is far from over. As frustration mounts over restrictions, in Texas, the Supreme Court ordered the release of a salon owner who was jailed after refusing to close her doors. In Oklahoma, 2 McDonald's employees were shot after they told a customer to leave the closed dining area.
You are in violation of my constitutional rights.
And in Miami Beach, this confrontation after a man was denied entry to a grocery store for not wearing a mask. Tonight, a nation angry and anxious with lives and livelihoods both on the line. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
This is Gabe Gutierrez. Today in Waterloo, Iowa, Tyson Foods partially reopened its largest pork plant in the country with new social distancing measures, mandatory face masks, and temperature checks.
Our essential workforce and infrastructure is critical to keeping the food supply chain open and moving.
Other meat processing facilities are also cautiously reopening. Just this week, plants in Nebraska, Minnesota, and South Dakota.
Within a week and a half, we should be in great shape, maybe sooner.
But in Colorado, Tin A is gravely ill in the hospital. Her daughter believes she contracted coronavirus by working at a meat plant.
We are poor, so we need money, and then we have no choice. My mom say we don't have a choice. If they told us to work, then we have to work. We have a lot of bill to pay. And my mom, she's a hard worker.
Pain across the food supply. Long lines at food banks from Texas to Illinois to Pennsylvania. A new survey finds 17% of mothers with young children say their kids are not getting enough to eat. That's 3 times what we saw in 2008 at the height of the recession. Today in New York's Long Island, hundreds of families showed up for free meals outside this elementary school.
We've never seen anything like this.
Hotel worker Maria Ramirez was recently furloughed. How long have you been waiting here in line?
Around 3 hours.
This woman drove up with her 7-year-old daughter.
It's a lot. I'm a single parent. I have a mortgage. I have a car note. So you kind of think, like, what's priority right now? Do I pay my mortgage or do I go grocery shopping?
New York State has now set aside $25 million for food banks to help make sure families like these don't go hungry.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez tonight. Thank you, Gabe. And now to more on the economic devastation from all this. 3 million more Americans filing for unemployment as the job situation grows increasingly bleak. Here's Stephanie Rule.
My savings is completely dried out.
In Lake Elmo, Minnesota, Tina Nichols needs help.
I'm on week 7 of not receiving any unemployment benefits. Just like when you would call a radio station to try to win concert tickets, that's how you have to call unemployment.
33.5 million Americans have gotten through filing for unemployment in the last 7 weeks. And that doesn't even include Nichols, a mother of 2, furloughed from her dental assistant job in March. Her weekend bartending gig also gone.
Last Thursday, when I called over 400 times and the phone kept giving me a busy signal after being on hold, I had to just say, let my kids know, like, okay, mommy needs a timeout. And I just went in the bathroom and cried in the shower.
Yesterday, she finally got someone on the phone, but was told it could take weeks before her claim gets processed. In Atlantic City, hundreds of cars waited at this food bank. Volunteers Robert Walls and Myra Gonzalez both work at casinos and are both out of work.
The fear of the unknown, the stress.
I'm ready to go back. I need to go back.
Normally, businesses on this boardwalk would be getting ready for summer. Instead, they're boarded up, unsure when they'll reopen and if their customers will even show up. As Americans struggle to make ends meet, NBC News has learned the White House is considering delaying the tax deadline again. After moving it to July 15th, the deadline could get pushed back even more to try and keep money in the pockets of those who need it most. To put the last 2 months in perspective, in 2009, during the worst month of the recession, the U.S. lost about 800,000 jobs. Now, since the stay-at-home orders began, every week between 3 and 6.9 million jobs were lost. The April jobs report out tomorrow is going to be bleak, but even when recovery begins, expect a long process. You cannot fall down this low and jump right back up again.
Showing little regard for social distancing, protesters hit the streets outside another state capital, this time in Massachusetts.
If I'm going to get sick, I'll get sick, and if I get it, I'll get over it.
Now, more than half the country is at least partially reopened after at least half a dozen more states followed suit Monday.
I want to remind everyone to be safe, to be smart, and to be responsible.
Welcome news for some business owners in West Virginia.
It feels good to be back out doing what we love.
Controversial for others in states with ongoing shutdowns. In California, some city leaders and businesses are openly ignoring stay-at-home orders. Jeff Gowerly owns a restaurant near Los Angeles.
We got to get back to work or the catastrophic effects are just going to be too much for us to handle.
Elsewhere, tempers have flared. In Michigan, 3 people are now charged with killing a security guard who authorities say was shot after a dispute with a customer over a face mask. Police are also looking for this man who wiped his nose on a clerk's shirt when he was asked why he wasn't wearing a face covering. USA! In Arizona, where emergency orders were extended, at least 2 county sheriffs say they won't enforce them.
We don't want to create criminals out of innocent people.
But after several crowded parties in Chicago, the mayor there has the opposite message.
If you act like a criminal and you violate the law and you refuse to do what is necessary to save lives in the city in the middle of a pandemic, we will take you to jail, period.
In Clearwater Beach, Florida, sun-soaked social distancing as beaches open for the first time in weeks.
Not so worried as long as everybody, heeds to the guidelines.
But across the state in Miami Beach, one park is now shut down after police issued more than 7,000 warnings over the weekend to people not wearing face masks. Across much of the country, malls are opening too, complete with masks, sealed-off areas, and yes, long lines.
We're probably going to get viewed as not doing what we should by getting out, but we're going to do it anyway.
Here in New York, reopening bars and restaurants to dine-in customers will happen late in the process, phase 3. Arts and entertainment, including Broadway, will be phase 4. The governor has not given an exact timetable for that.
Also this morning, a pharmaceutical company in Switzerland says the FDA has cleared its antibody test for emergency use here in the U.S. This is a move that could significantly expand testing capacity. For more on that, let's turn to NBC News medical correspondent Dr. John Torres. And Dr. Torres, good morning to you. We've talked about antibody tests so many times, and there have been a lot of problems with their accuracy. What's the implication of this particular test, the Roche test, being out on the market and being approved?
And good morning, Savannah. This one was approved under the emergency use authorization of the FDA. And the importance of this one is it's very accurate. It's up to 100% accurate. It can detect 99.8% of these. But with time, we'll know how accurate and how good it is, because the more patients we have, the more accuracy information we get. But it's going to be an important tool to try and find out how coronavirus is spreading through the country. It is a blood test, so it takes a little more longer to perform.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. This is not the pinprick test. They actually draw blood for that. So then it's got to go to the lab, I presume, and be processed?
Exactly. And they say they're going to do 50 million tests a month right now. And by the end of the year, they hope to have 100 million tests. This is one of 11 tests for antibodies that the FDA has done emergency use authorization for. So there will be more tests out there. Those aren't necessarily gone through that process. And so we don't know how good they are. And these ones, just because you have the antibodies, it doesn't necessarily mean you have that immunity. We're still not exactly sure because this is such a new virus. That's what scientists and researchers are still trying to find out.
Well, that was my next question, actually, that very issue about, the antibodies, you shows that you've had it, but we don't know how long you're immune if you're immune, even if you've had COVID-19.
Exactly, Savannah. Once you recover from coronavirus, you're going to have antibodies. We know that. What we don't know is what level of antibodies you need to get immunity, how long that immunity is going to last, and how good that immunity is going to be. And that'll take time to determine. More than 4 or 5 months that we've had the virus, that'll take years to determine. So for right now, the main message is you can't let your guard down. Don't get a false sense of security if you do have positive antibodies. Just remember, you still need to do social distancing. You still need to wear masks. You still need to clean your hands. All the things we've been doing lately.
Yeah, it's not the get out of quarantine free card that so many of us were wishing for. Dr. Torres, thank you so much.
As national stay-at-home guidelines are set to expire, a go-your-own-way approach is rapidly taking hold across the country. Governors facing a common enemy, but with a splintered array of strategies, leaving some of us under lockdown and others perhaps making dinner reservations. Tonight, there are signs of hope in the push to test more Americans for the virus and learn just what it is we're facing, as the number of dead keeps climbing, now over 62,000. We have a lot to tell you about tonight, starting with Miguel Almaguer.
Tonight, Los Angeles, home to 4 million people, becoming the nation's first major city to offer free coronavirus testing to all residents. The massive move to screen citizens, followed by the mayor of Jersey City, who says testing everyone is key to getting the economy back on track. With more drive-up sites in states like Wisconsin, in New York, the epicenter of the national outbreak, free testing for all is not available. Today, in an unprecedented move, the governor says starting next week, the city's subway system will be shut down from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. amid scenes like these of the homeless asleep on trains.
Let's clean, disinfect those trucks, those buses and trains every 24 hours. Why? Because that's the way we best protect the health of our essential workers.
With the national death toll climbing over 60,000, the state-by-state approach to reopening night and day. Just as officials in Texas announced beaches will reopen tomorrow, today the governor of California ordered beaches closed in Orange County, citing scenes like these. But local officials say it's an abuse of power, saying residents have been obeying guidelines.
I think the governor is overstating the concern, and as I said, I don't believe this is a wise move.
As protests to end stay-at-home orders in Michigan unfolded today, including armed demonstrators who entered the Capitol, states like Arizona, Illinois, Maine, Nevada, and Washington all extended their mandates. In Colorado, union officials at this meat packing plant say a 6th employee has died from the virus. But in Pennsylvania, hairdresser Nicole Messino says she's opening her doors whether she has permission or not.
I have employees that are like, I'm not going to be able to eat if it's 4 or 5 weeks. So I had to make the decision that, you know what, I'm just going to open my business.
With roughly 8 states that have stay-at-home orders expiring today or tomorrow, no state has reached the White House threshold to ease that restriction, a 14-day decline in cases.
You can't just leap over things and get into a situation where you're really tempting a rebound. That's the thing I get concerned about. I hope they don't do that.
With the national guidelines from the White House advising Americans to stay at home expiring today, American and Delta say all employees and passengers will soon need to wear face coverings, a sign of what could be to come at businesses all across the country.
Let's turn now to the staggering economic crisis for so many families and businesses. New numbers today showing 30 million Americans are now jobless after just 6 weeks. Many more are still having problems just applying for benefits. Here's Jolene Kent.
From Washington,
a couple weeks from now, I'm going to have a whole new slew of bills coming up.
to New York.
I've never experienced anything like this before.
To Florida.
I'm scared right now. It's not okay.
30 million workers have filed for unemployment in the last 6 weeks. That means a stunning 18% of the U.S. workforce is out of a job, compared to just over 4% 2 months ago. And that doesn't even include people like single mother Ashley Reeves, who's been trying to file for unemployment in Florida for a month.
I just feel at a loss. I just feel like nothing's gonna come through.
She was told this week she is ineligible, like 40% of people applying in Florida. However, the state has not explained why, only telling workers to apply again. The surge in applications nationwide is fueled by major companies still slashing thousands of jobs.
Nearly 18 million Americans have received unemployment benefits, but many states are still struggling with outdated systems and an avalanche of applications, even here in California.
Which I know sounds crazy because we're in California and we have the tech capital of the world. We just wish it could work faster.
What are you doing to fix these problems?
We have now redirected over 1,300 state employees to help with unemployment insurance benefits.
But the efforts to solve these problems in many states are still not enough. Laura Sachs lost her job as a Broadway tour musician last month. She and her boyfriend, who is a pianist, have applied for unemployment.
I haven't spoke to anyone and I haven't received anything.
So they're getting creative, taking song requests online for donations.
Because there have been so many people, I no longer feel unemployed, honestly.
A positive note in this economic catastrophe. Jolene Kent, NBC News, Los Angeles.
This is Gabe Gutierrez. As the Navy's hospital ship Comfort departed New York today, a moving salute from the city's first responders. Now there are new questions about whether their jobs could soon be on the line without help from the federal government.
The state has a $13 billion deficit. They have provided us nothing. Nothing for police, nothing for firefighters.
Across the country, state and local governments are facing crushing budget shortfalls due to cratering tax revenues. One report estimates states will be short more than $200 billion over the next fiscal year. 21 states would have to fill budget gaps of at least 10%. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has suggested states could declare bankruptcy.
We're not interested in borrowing money from future generations to send down to states to help them with bad decisions they've made in the past, unrelated to the coronavirus epidemic.
Will you be able to fill this huge budget shortfall without deep cuts to the police and fire departments?
No, there's no way.
Nan Whaley is the mayor of Dayton, Ohio, which has already furloughed nearly 500 city workers.
We need to have federal assistance because those frontline services, one, are so important, and number two, they help keep the economy moving.
The toll on government workers has been grueling. Today, mourners said their final goodbye to 5-year-old COVID victim Skylar Herbert, the daughter of 2 first responders in Detroit. In New Jersey, state police civilian employee Latasha Andrews was just 33 years old. 3 other members of her family have also died.
You're just an all-around amazing person, always really giving 100%.
Across the country, many local governments say they may have to make drastic cuts by June. Lester?
This morning, California taking a step backwards after crowds packed just open beaches over the weekend. 2 law enforcement sources telling NBC News Governor Gavin Newsom now plans to shut down all beaches and state parks effective tomorrow. On Wednesday, he told Savannah trying to recover too quickly could start a second wave more damaging than the first.
We just don't want to run the 90-yard dash. You saw the images. That is a real concern.
The Bay Area also extending its shelter-in-place orders through May, although limited outdoor businesses can reopen, including construction and golf courses. In an effort to get back to normal, the mayor of Los Angeles promising to make coronavirus testing available to anyone who wants it, whether they have symptoms or not, the first major U.S. city to do so. Meanwhile, in Florida, where some of Miami Beach's most iconic stretches sit empty,
we do have hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Governor Ron DeSantis allowing restaurants and retail to reopen next week at 25% capacity, but not in the 3 biggest counties in the southeast part of the state. Arash Azarbarzan runs this luxury hotel on Miami Beach,
It's more frustrating than confusing. We wish there was one message.
In hard-hit New York City, where plans to reopen remain on hold, a grim discovery. Dozens of bodies found decomposing in trucks outside of a Brooklyn funeral home after it ran out of room. Its owner faces no criminal charges, but did receive 2 citations from the health department. With more than 18,000 dead, the city's funeral homes and cemeteries have been overwhelmed. The outlook much brighter in Miami Beach, where familiar comforts are finally returning. The city opening parks, golf courses, and marinas, even as many businesses remain shuttered.
I literally feel like this is the best day of my life, and it brings me hope, you know, for the future. Like, oh, this thing might be ending soon.
It's like a weight being lifted off your chest in a way.
Oh, yeah.
As businesses reopen, there's a patchwork of policies triggering new concerns. Workers at 5 Dallas restaurants owned by Hillstone, a popular national chain, tell NBC News they were told not to wear masks on the job.
We have to stop the spread and everything, so it's probably not a good idea.
I probably would not dine in at a restaurant if the servers weren't wearing a mask.
Outrage spilling over on social media. One customer saying not letting your employees wear masks during a global pandemic is insane. Hillstone did not respond to NBC News' request for comment, but did reply to the post, saying our staff members who felt comfortable working without a mask are covering the limited number of shifts we have available. Those that didn't feel comfortable were encouraged to stay home. Nobody was fired or forced to do anything. On Hillstone's website, the company tells Texas customers, if you are concerned about your safety in this respect, we hope you'll join us at a later date. But in an executive order on reopening, Texas Governor Greg Abbott says businesses and customers should use good faith efforts to follow health protocols and encouraged everyone to wear appropriate face coverings.
The key is following your state or local guidelines. There are a lot of challenges they have to follow, but really just follow the local guidance.
And several big retailers sharing their new plans to keep employees and customers safe.
The Gap reopening 800 stores by the end of May, with shorter hours and face coverings provided for employees. And when it's time, registers guarded with plexiglass. Expect similar changes at Kohl's and Nordstrom, and big changes coming to theme parks. Shanghai Disney Resort is opening Monday, the company considering allowing fewer people into its parks at once, more health screenings, and virtual lines to maintain social distance at Disneyland and Disney World. A blueprint for what comes next. Jolene Kent, NBC News.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
The toll of COVID-19 has been focused on the nation's hotspots, from New York and New Jersey to Louisiana, Michigan, and California. But there are many counties and states across the rural West where case numbers are in the single digits with no deaths. Stephanie Sy takes a look at the COVID divide.
Protests across America have pointed to a dilemma state officials have been grappling with since the coronavirus outbreak began. How much economic pain should business owners and employees endure to protect the public from COVID-19? In urban areas where people live and work in close contact, there's less debate. But across parts of the West, in towns of only a few thousand people, the question can be more complicated.
We're already so remote and rural that there wasn't a lot of risk here.
Jennifer Ramsey owns the Iron Bar, a gym in Pinedale, Wyoming. The surrounding county, called Sublet, has recorded 1 case of COVID-19 and no deaths.
People were doing their part with social distancing, and people wanted to open up. They wanted to work. They were worried about their livelihoods.
With that in mind, Ramsey defied the statewide order and reopened, only to be shut back down.
This business pays for everything, my mortgage, my utilities at home, and I ended up getting an eviction notice. I was pretty stressed out about all of that.
With lockdowns now relaxing in Wyoming, she was allowed to reopen in recent days with precautions in place. Across town, the Cowboy Bar is also open, partially. Owner Lila Golden also leases space to a barber shop and a restaurant in the building.
All three of us have suffered from it. I don't think Wyoming should have been shut down, let alone Sublette County.
She found a workaround to keep her business open, serving food and drinks outside. The county health officer said she was not violating the state's order.
He said he didn't have a problem with it, but we had to keep at least 6 feet social distance. As long as we did that, and a bartender brought the drink and another one took the money, then we could do this.
They found a little loophole.
Dr. Brendan Fitzsimmons is the health officer in Sublette County. His fear is overwhelming the region's healthcare facilities.
We don't have a hospital, and we're dependent on some of the surrounding hospitals to be able to take our patients. With the virus, you don't really know where you are today. You know where you are 2 weeks ago. If we had a cluster of cases here in this county right now, 30, 40 people who are very ill, it could be very difficult for us to deal with.
Sublette County Commissioner Chair Dr. David Burnett cautions that these towns are not bubbles.
Even though we are small, we're isolated, and we're rural, we still have a lot of traffic through this area. We're impacted by seasonal workers. We have the oil field community that brings in people from the outside. We're on the map in terms of visitors wanting to come into our county.
Nearby in eastern Idaho, Rigby Mayor Jason Richardson argues the one-size-fits-all state order doesn't work.
We have some pretty clear data that in all of southeast Idaho, we haven't had any deaths. In our county, we've had 4 cases. We don't face the same thing they face over in Boise or in Blaine County. Here, where we don't have that community spread that you're seeing over there.
Richardson says the closure of non-essential businesses in Rigby, the principal town in the county, has devastated people's finances.
What I hear outside of the news are stories about families that aren't able to make their payments for their car insurance, their health insurance, their mortgages. Those difficulties pile up and they become just as dangerous and fearful as the pandemic itself.
We're ready to open anytime.
From his empty Mexican restaurant near Idaho Falls, Juan Hernandez says he and his wife have lost 75% of their business and should be able to welcome customers now that they've taken necessary measures.
We can take tables out so we can separate it to show the people that they don't have to be close each other. So we do a lot more cleaning. We use gloves, we use masks to show the people that we clean.
But some Idaho residents are unsure.
I'm cautious but not paranoid. I think we're kind of doomed almost for a second go-round if we open up and get too close too quick.
I don't know if I'd be comfortable because I'm kind of at a high risk, with diabetes and a couple other autoimmune disorders.
In Montana, there have been no known COVID-19 cases in nearly half of the state's 56 counties. Officials say in part because Governor Steve Bullock started shutting down businesses a week after the first cases cropped up. With only 1 million people spread out across a state 3 times the size of New York, many residents outside the main cities are already pretty isolated.
Our curve, our projected surge, was effectively flat.
Dr. Mark Williams is Chief Physician Officer for Bozeman Health and was involved in the state task force that evaluated stay-at-home directives and phased reopening.
When you look at eastern Montana, I think those counties have not seen a single case. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, when it became very obvious that the healthcare facilities in Montana would be able to maintain or be able to take care of a surge, then it became much more logical and reasonable to talk about reopening businesses in a phased fashion, especially in those areas which hadn't seen a single case.
Is there a warning that should go along with that as well?
We have to avoid that false sense of security. So in 1918, Montana was ravaged by the Spanish influenza. If we can reflect back on how other similar epidemics have affected rural communities, then the story or the risk can become very clear. Because in those rural communities, even if the likelihood of an outbreak is less, the access to healthcare resources is also less.
But Dr. Williams admits that while saving lives is paramount, for many, so is saving livelihoods.
Just recognize that when people are wanting to reopen their business, they're doing it for very good reasons. I think if we can all get on the same page and try to understand where we're each situated, those conversations become much easier. It's a matter of honesty and transparency.
Wisdom that could be applied across the country, divided by the pandemic. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Tsai in Phoenix.
There's good news tonight about paying it forward in these tough economic times. So many Americans are taking that stimulus check they received from the government and doing something surprising with it. Here's Kristen Dahlgren.
Hey everyone, I pledge to share my check.
Across the country,
I have pledged to donate.
I will be donating.
A new campaign in kindness.
I'm going to pay it forward.
Americans donating their stimulus checks to those in need.
It's just good. It's just the right thing to do.
In Killeen, Texas, Ron Carney, a carpenter by trade, spent his money on groceries to feed over 160 hungry neighbors.
It was worth my stimulus check, believe me, just to make all them people smile for at least one day.
People out here, they need the help.
In Texas, it was this scene. Thousands of cars lined up at the San Antonio Food Bank that inspired Elaine Hovey to donate her entire $1,200 check.
I wanted to pass it on to someone that it could help.
At this Arkansas steakhouse, workers got a big surprise from some regulars, a $1,200 tip.
Came at a time that most of our staff really needed that.
Enough for every employee to get $100. Even those in the medical community promising to keep giving. Dr. Jess Friedman, who qualified for a check based on her residency status last year, plans to give some money away.
But there's also this part of just like seeing and recognizing people to say, like, I see you, I see your suffering, and it matters to me is a really important thing that I think can affect a person's emotional and physical health as well.
At the heart of the American spirit, a sense of duty.
I'm going to take care of my neighborhood. If everybody takes care of their neighborhood, we're going to be okay.
A gift of hope to so many who need it most.
Thank you.
Thanks. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News.
Dallas schools may be closed, but on Thursdays, cafeteria manager Yolanda Fisher is as busy as ever, greeting families, giving each a week's worth of free meals.
How many do you need?
What was your first concern when you heard the schools were going to close?
I knew a lot of kids, this was the only meal they got a day.
They are getting 7 days of breakfast.
Yolanda's school has served more than 60,000 meals since it shut down, over 10,000 this week alone.
There's the school food, so they're used to it now, and they love it. And at home, sometimes we don't have that.
It does help us. Well, we know, okay, we got a week's worth of food for the kids at least.
Yolanda knows the struggle families are facing.
When I first started working for the school district and I wasn't a supervisor, I probably made $19,000 a year. So I would instruct my kids, make sure you eat your breakfast, make sure you eat your lunch, because that's all we're going to have until the next day.
Now she and her colleagues spotlighted by Time Magazine. And she has a message she wants everyone to hear. Do you worry that any of the parents of the kids may feel ashamed or embarrassed to take help?
Yeah, some of them have expressed shame. I know what they feel, and I just let them know it's no shame in needing help. You know, the shame is that you could get help and you hide and don't get it. You know, it's no reason to go hungry if we out here feeding you.
Yeah, no one is going hungry on her watch, and we know the folks there are extremely grateful. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
And now, Hoda, to that story of hope and perseverance in New York City. A patient who survived a long battle with coronavirus is finally back home. And that was the moment. Rodrigo Saval received a heartwarming send-off from doctors and nurses at Mount Sinai West Hospital yesterday. He was the hospital's first COVID patient way back at the beginning of March. Well, 53 days later, he's healthy and he's going home. Amazing to see the healthcare workers applauding him. You know what? They deserve applause as well.
I got to tell you, I just like this newscast. We started with a potential treatment. We ended the block with a guy going home. So that's a good way to start it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marlon Palmer, and I'm going to give you the final episode of this video. And I want you to also listen to the beautiful singing of Lisbeth Malgar, one of our best SDA singers, as she brings you closer to Jesus with the words that I have to tell you today. Let me have a prayer with you before I start. Dear mighty and heavenly Father, the God of the universe, the God of all gods, the most gracious, loving, and powerful God, Jesus Christ. I ask you to protect my family, protect myself, protect my friends and my neighbors, and even the ones that have done wrong to me. Protect the world and the ones that are serving you as a true and only powerful God. God, we know why you allow this to happen. It's because the people are disrespecting you, disrespecting your covenants, and disrespecting the law of God. Bless us in the name of Jesus and in the name of the great almighty God, Christ Jesus. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. This is not just a weird coincidence. God has allowed this atrocity to happen is because the people in Wuhan, China has engaged in an improper behavior of selling animals and unauthorized animals as food. Cockroaches, pigs, monkeys, elephants, you name it. Bugs, worms. This is why this problem started. And this is not being personal against the Chinese, because we have Chinese in our company and we love Chinese people. But we don't love their behavior. The Bible says to obey my word. The Bible says eat, drink, do all to the glory of God. It didn't say do what you want to do. And this is why this is happening. People all over the world are dying from this flu disease. Thousands who are critically ill already. Some has asthma and heart conditions, and they get this disease, they just die. But this is the will of God. Yes, some of those who may have things that they're doing in their life, some are child molesters, some are thieves, some are homosexuals, some are or liars and thieves, God have allowed some of these people to die. It is not just a weird coincidence. We don't know. We're going to find out when we get to heaven. When we get to heaven, we don't see certain people, we will know why they didn't make it. And I know God will protect me. I live, eat, drink, do all to the glory of my God. I live for Jesus. I don't live for myself. Today I'm going to tell you, don't put your heart in treasures. If you have a beautiful house or you're thinking of a beautiful house, forget it. Just live for Jesus. Live for the basic things of life. And prepare. A storm is coming. Prepare for the end. The end is now. We are in the sixth seal. The seventh seal, the world is over. This is the sixth seals. And we at the very, very end. God will not provide for you what you could have provided for yourself. Don't let no one fool you. Get your health together. Get your heart together. Get your exercise. Start to buy your food that you need so you don't die before Jesus comes. Study the Word of God. Get ready. A storm is coming. And it's coming real fast. It's coming like a roller coaster. Now, those of you who think that this thing is going to get better one day and the stock market is going to get better, no, it is false. It will not get better. It's only going to get worse. The stock market will crash. There will be riots in the street. There will be stealing everywhere. There will be killings. And it will just get worse. Because this is what Jesus wants. And those who did not believe this warning will die. And some will die without Jesus. Yes, let me tell you one thing. Donald Trump will cancel the elections of 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, this great crisis that is going on around the world is the will of God. God is allowing these crises to happen. Yes, some of it may be orchestrated by the evil men of this earth. The president, some of his engineers, that's very possible. And I wouldn't doubt it. Because they know what's coming. This is not a surprise. The only thing that they don't know is how serious this will be. How much death this will be. They probably have never seen a disease and a wrath so vicious with ruthless ending. So what I'm telling you today is, this is a crisis that is going in the world. The whole world is shut down. The whole world is locked up in their homes like a prison. The whole world is dying one by one. And God is allowing some of these people to die. Because let me tell you something. You don't know what these people are doing. You don't know what they have done. Maybe some of these people are child molesters. Some of these people worship foreign gods. Some of these people are cheating and stealing money from the government and stealing money from people and getting rich. There could be a whole lot of things what these people are doing. And you may only think it's just a disease. If God wanted me to die, I would have been dead. A month ago, I was walking down the street thinking about money. Thinking about some deal that I made and someone may have cheated me out some money. And before I know it, an angel jumped in front of me and said, "Marlon, stop! A bus is coming." and I missed the bus by 12 inches, that could have threw me maybe one whole block and broken me into pieces. So if God wanted me to die, I would have been dead. This wasn't the first time. I know God is with me. I know God don't want me to die, because he keeps protecting me. The other time, I was looking at a beautiful woman, looking and looking and looking. She crossed the street. I'm looking so hard that I was hypnotized. And the angel jumped again and said, Marlon, stop! A car is coming. The car just missed me over by the tip of my toes. There's angels out there. There is a God out there. God is real. These things are not fantasy. This thing is not no Mother Nature. This is God. God exists. And let me tell you something. This crisis is coming. I want you to be prepared. Because, some people are thinking, well, God is going to protect me in the tribulation. This is not the tribulation. This is the closing of probation. God will not provide for you what you could have provided for yourself. That is clearly written in the books of Ellen G. White. He will not provide for you what you could have provided for yourself. So get ready. Prepare for the end. Prepare, my friend. Get your heart together. Get your body together. Exercise. Buy yourself the foods that you need. The healthy foods, so you don't go crazy and start to steal with these animals out there when they start to tear up the stores. Get ready. A storm is coming. So don't be foolish. Prepare, because a storm is coming. Some of you SDA people who got the truth will be washed away. Some of the newcomers and the people from the Catholic Church, the Baptist Church, and all these other churches is going to hear the truth. They're going to come right in because they use common sense. Because I'm telling you, you're going to get to a point where you're going to say, well, I didn't know this was so hard. I just thought it was just a mild disease, and it led to the Sunday law and all these things, just one after the other, just kept on coming. I had no idea. Yes, it caught me by surprise too. I'm trying to prepare, and I'm still preparing. Because I know the wrath of the devil is real. And he's trying to take your soul. Get it right with Jesus. Jesus is coming. This is the end. And there is worse to come. This is just the closing of probation. More disease going to come. The country's about to be shut down. Donald Trump is going to cancel the election of the United States in November. That's right. Mark my word. He is going to cancel the election, and they're going to be riots in the street. They're going to be burning of buildings. Business all over the world is going to collapse. The stock market is going to collapse. Everything is going to collapse. Yes, get your last share of this money. Get your last share of these $1,200 he's saying to every person. The $10,000 he's saying to all the businesses. Yes, get it now while you can. Why do you think he's giving you money? He's giving you money because you're going to be locked up for a long time, and he don't want you to go crazy. So when you run out of money, you can't go to work, you're going to starve or steal or beg. That's right. He know the chaos that's coming. And let me tell you something. If you're not locked up to next year, which the government wants to do, he might let you out for a month or so. Yes, he let you out. But then, maybe in 2 months or 3 months, He's going to lock you up again and tell you, okay, oh, too many people died. Millions are dying. Thousands are dying. Oh, we have to put him back in. Lock him up again. And then it's going to pass on over the election. Past November, past December. The country going to go crazy. People are going to die in their homes. And you know what? You're going to see things that you have never seen before. This is modern chaos. People are going to get so angry they're just going to stop listening to the government. They're going to be troops in the street, shooting guns, machine guns, people dying everywhere. It's going to get crazy. So when I'm telling you, there is chaos coming. This is coming. And I'm telling you, you better prepare. Because this is the end. Prepare now while you can. Because the books of Ellen G. White clearly says, God will not provide for you what you could have provided for yourself. It's right there in Country Living. He's not going to provide nothing for you. God wants this to happen. Because he wants to wake up the world. He wants to let the people know that this is the end. The reality of this is coming. Yes, when you get to the great tribulation and you cannot provide for yourself, he's going to provide for you. He's going to shelter you. Maybe the bullets or whatever the government doing can't affect you. They will see you and can't kill you. God's shield is over you. But before you get to that point, it's going to be horrible. He's going to turn you upside down and shake every coin out your pocket to make sure you're a child of God. You're not going into heaven unless he knows for real. He's going to bend you and twist you, and even down to death, he will take you. Because he wants to make sure that you're going with him. You, the real child of God. After what Satan did to him, and took a few thousand angels of God and deceived them, he will never let this happen again. So what I'm telling you, the government can't fix the world. This world is not getting better. Everything is going to get worse. Nothing will be perfect. The water will be more contaminated tomorrow. The streets will be more contaminated. Everything is going to get worse. My dream of making millions and millions and millions of dollars is gone. My company is living on wooden legs. My dream of living in a beautiful mansion is gone. I'm just living in a nice house. And the mansion idea is over. My dream of driving all these luxury cars are gone. I don't even care for a vehicle right now. Because all I'm doing is just feeding a machine. And soon, I won't have the money to put gas in it. It's time to live a normal life. Live a normal life. Live for Jesus. Because your treasures of the world will be gone someday. This is the end. This is the 6 seals. And Jesus is coming. And I want to know if you're ready. I want to know if you're ready. Get ready. Because all these things will soon pass away. And my friends, I'm telling you, Jesus loves you. And I don't care if you're a man or a woman, I love you too. This is why I'm giving you this message. Come to Jesus. Bring it all to Jesus. Eat, drink, do all to the glory of God. Because Jesus loves you. I love you too. And if I didn't love you, I wouldn't tell you this message. Get ready. It is a shame that this world is ending. It's a shame that things are going to go through a great crisis. but no one can fix it. If Donald Trump is telling you we're going to fix it, we can't fix it. We got to deal with it. We got to allow God to do what he wants to do. These people, this nonsense started in China, Wuhan, China, when they start eating these unclean animals and these filthy animals and insects and crabs and lobsters and pigs and bats and all these nasty animals. This is the punishment of God. This is not just a weird coincidence. This is what God is allowed to happen. God told you to eat, drink, and do all to the glory of God. He did not tell you to eat cockroaches. He did not tell you to eat pigs. And worse yet, he did not tell you to eat bats. What is you going to eat next? I was watching one of my research videos where a man asked another Chinese man, he said, well, what do you guys don't eat? He looked at the other Chinese and he looked at the other one and he was confused. And he said, everything is on the table. Everything is on the table. How filthy could you be? Everything is on the table? Where is God? God don't exist. Or what? Everything is not on the table. God told you to eat the things that he told you in Leviticus 11. He told you what you could eat. He told you can eat the fowl of the air. He told you can eat the turkey. He told you can eat the fish with scales. I mean, he went through a very detailed analysis of what you could eat. He did not tell you to eat.
Thank you so much, Marlon. You have said enough. God bless you all, and obey the covenants and the commandments of God. Thank you for listening. Please purchase our 13-set DVD called End Time Angel Preparedness for $100 and know the truth of the end times, how to prepare, and get your life right with God. This video is so good, we guarantee your money back in 6 months if you are not satisfied. Call now worldwide, and review our telephone number in our YouTube's description box. We have only 2 videos left. Call now.
For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be.
South Tower following the horrific tornadoes. 3 twisters have touched down just south of town. And now, a rolling motion. I believe we're having an earthquake. I have never before seen such horrific weather. I advise you to take cover immediately.
Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And thus we shall always be with the Lord.
With the world convulsing below them, the redeemed of the earth take flight and rise above the destruction. They fly up to join their Savior among the clouds of angels. Sorrow, sin, and suffering are forever behind them.
Welcome to Palmer International, an end-time angel message, the eternal gospel of the 3 angels' messages of eternal salvation of mankind. Click on our videos below or purchase a DVD and know the everlasting truth and save
Let me
your
say a
soul
small prayer. Dear Father, help us and give us the knowledge, give us the wisdom, give us the blessing, and bless every heart around the world, that this video may go all around the world, viral if possible, so it can save souls and bring us into remembrance that you is God, Kings of kings and Lords of lords. Forgive us all. Forgive me if I've committed any sins. In the name of Jesus. In the name of the great Almighty God, the Kings of kings and the Lords of lords. Amen. Have a wonderful day.
Dear audience, thank you for watching. If you sincerely enjoyed this video presentation, then please send a donation to support our channel and receive our amazing contents. Please also subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell to receive our notifications.